Good to see you all. Love the banter. Probably haven't seen each other face to face in a while. Hope you all had a great Easter holiday. I did. It's good to get away a little bit. So I know the timing of this is kind of tough, but it was very important that we got together. So that being said, I'd like to call to order the Superintendent Advisory Council meeting for Monday, April 12th, 2021. That being said, we'll have a roll call.
Mr. Alexander?
Present.
Mr. Bartlett?
Here.
Mr. Ruckus?
Here.
Dr. Coker?
Here.
Mr. Dozak? Not in attendance. Mr. DeVilliers?
Here.
Dr. Ebar? Here. Dr. Fountain?
Here.
Dr. Gorey? Not in attendance. Dr. Gray? Not in attendance. Mr. Javia?
Here.
Dr. Joffrion?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Not in attendance. Dr. Joseph?
Here.
Miss Laviolette?
Jones is here.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw him. Okay. Miss Laviolette is here. Dr. Lewis is excused. Dr. Ortling has a proxy. Ms. Granier? Here. Mr. Powell?
Here.
Mr. Strong? Not in attendance. Ms. Tanner?
Here.
Mr. Watts?
Here.
And Mr. Williams is excused. You have a quorum.
Thank you. That being said, just real quick, would like to say a special welcome to one of our own, Ms. Bochet, Bessie member. Just thank you as always. And she's having so much fun. Glad that she's here. Just like to recognize her as a member of Bessie. So that being said, I'll turn this over to Ms. Shani.
First item is approval of the minutes from March 2nd, 2021. Can I get a motion?
I move. I'll second.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item, 3.1 on page 3. Consideration of an update report regarding accountability and assessment structure for the 2020-2021 school year. Need a motion to receive. Second.
All right, Dr. Brummer.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Watts. I'm a bit like you. I was pretty excited to see people come in the room today. And yeah, I wish I had more time to engage with everybody, but glad to see everyone. Just share, as I always share, how proud I am of all of you and the work that you have done over the course of the year, and how I would challenge anyone if they disagreed with the statement that I made, that I would put your work up against anything in this country in this particular year. And I know that has been a series of never-ending decisions since last March to get to where we are today, and you all have just done it so well with your teams, and for that I'm very thankful. Specifically to the agenda items that we're discussing today, we went ahead and called this meeting because, you know, as we have been talking about accountability over the course of the year, frankly, about future accountability, we have tried the best of our abilities to build this alongside you, as well as the Accountability Commission, as well as others, and never came and just said, hey, here's what it is, let's do it. We've tried to listen to feedback and move to the place where we are today, and what we're able to share with all of you today. I can tell you the two specific endeavors that we have in for consideration and discussion. They align with a couple of your endeavors as an organization, where you put out, was it 3 or 4, Mr. Watts, priorities at the beginning of the year from the association, and these two align with those things. So we're glad to also be leaning in these particular areas. I want to just frame for you the idea that whenever we're visiting on policy discussions and policy decisions, you know, those are, whenever you're making a policy shift, one of the most important reasons that you do that is to shift outcomes, or to get a different outcome. And that's what we know that we all need to do. Specifically, whenever we look at some of our outcomes in literacy, and we know, you know, 46% of kids are mastering content on ELA by the time they leave third grade. That number's a little lower for math. Just kind of across the board, we know that we need to do do better in that early elementary space. And so that's what this is helping to try and be a solve for. But also whenever we think about that high school experience, and we know some of the outcomes that we have and some of the outcomes that we want to see, personalization of the high school experience, being delivered in connection from the student from when they leave your school to what's next in their life. And so we have a really good relationship right now with Board of Regents, really good relationship, and I think that's going to go a long way in helping kids figure out, what's next in their futures. But you have to put in place policy decisions to be able to get some of the outcomes that you want. Some people could say, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, why are we having these discussions? But these discussions are about implementation 2-3 years down the road. And so if we wait 2 or 3 years, then we're talking about implementation 5-6 years down the road. And so I think that we are all capable of dealing with what we are dealing with, but also having conversations about what the future could and should look like for kids and educators and all. So that's why we're here today. So I don't think there's anything, -1, all of this is generally information you've previously seen or had the opportunity to discuss and give feedback. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Noel to begin the presentation.
Good morning. I would like to start today by bringing an update on assessment and accountability for 2020-2021. And I'd like to start with a statement that Bessie actually published directly after the receipt of our last letter from USDOE. And in outlining just some summary statements here out of this particular written statement by Bessie, I'd like to share that one of their main points here is that there's nothing quite as critical this year as assessing our students. And not assessing our students would actually prevent families and teachers from gathering valuable student data and insights into future decision-making about instructional planning. Also in this particular year, not only have we had a pandemic, but also, as you know, we have suffered hurricanes and also just some winter storms that historically we had never dealt with. So as we maneuver these once-in-a-lifetime type situations, it's crucial to have the data necessary for doing a few things. One of them helping us to understand the learning gaps that students may have that have been created this year or widened this year. But also we must be able to close them. And in order to close those gaps, we would need this data to help support goals for the future. So I wanted to share with you that in the packet today, you actually have a link to this statement. And you're welcome to visit that at any time. So that is the first update I wanted to bring to you. I'd also like to share that through this, there's some additional supports that are being put out from a motion that Bessie had in March, and we'll move there to the March meeting of Bessie with a couple of updates there. On March 9th, the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee met to discuss an update regarding school and district accountability. There were actually 2 motions that came from this particular committee meeting. One of them was a motion regarding graduation requirements for seniors this year. And the second, a motion regarding school and district accountability for 2020-2021 school year. And so I want to take a minute just to provide you an update around that first motion, which was some flexibility guidance around graduating seniors. And due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Bessie actually granted some additional opportunities to high school students. But before any of this could take place, there had to be a few things in place. One of them is that high school seniors had to have met all other graduation requirements. Second, they had to have attempted all required LEAP 2025 assessments at least one time. And third, they needed to be enrolled during the spring 2021 semester and up for graduation by August 31 of 2021. If those things were in place and there was the need to substitute something for a high school assessment where the approaching basic measurement had not been met yet, then these substitutions will be allowed. First, if that student has an ACT composite score of 17, that would be an allowable substitution for a high school LEAP assessment. If the student did not have that composite score, then a second opportunity would be to drill down into the subject scores. And if there was a 17 on any of the subject scores that related to a subject pair of high school assessments, then that can be called a substitution. If neither one or two of these opportunities are in place, then a score of silver or better on ACT workkeys for students who are pursuing a career diploma could also be used as a substitution. And then if none of the following or any of the previous substitutions are in place, a fourth opportunity is the participation in 20 or more extending learning hours per LEAP 2025 subject area that's needed for high school graduation purposes. If the 20 or more extended learning hours is the option that's being chosen, then there is a particular template that will be needed to show fulfillment or validation of those 20 hours, along with validation that when the student finishes, they are performing at an approaching basic or above level in that subject area. That template is linked to your presentation here today, but it's also found in our support documents on our website. A couple of other things here, one of them being not only the validation of that taking place, but the use of a qualified teacher for this 20 hours of extended learning. This qualified teacher is one that would hold a valid or current teaching certificate or a final compass evaluation of effective, emerging, or better. And then also, if a high school senior this year is missing an IBC credential, then WorkKey Silver and above can substitute for the IBC credentialing requirement for the purpose of meeting graduation requirements. There's also a comprehensive frequently asked questions document that is linked in your presentation today that is also found on our website with supporting documents. The second motion that went forth on the March 9th BESI meeting was one that provided some next steps or guidance for this year's 2020-21 accountability scoring. I'd like to share with you that this particular motion held 5 bullets, so I'm just going to briefly go through each of these bullets. The first bullet was for the Department of Education to issue guidance to schools related to test administration and provide communication resources to aid parents and students in understanding the importance of measuring student learning this year for purposes of planning and then also student support. We have started definitely working with the support out to districts and schools for test administration, and as you know, there are some additional flexibilities built in this year, such as alternate site approval, possible one-on-one testing, and so forth. Your district test coordinator has been working very closely with Jennifer Bayard in those different settings and what that could look like for students. We're also working currently on the communication piece out to parents and students, and we'll hope to publish that soon. Then moving to the second bullet would be that once this test data is in place, that we provide a report of aggregate 2021 test results and then also the extent to which these results are misaligned with historical trending. The third bullet would be to recommend any adjustments, federal waivers, or other forms of relief required to ensure school ratings and scores fairly communicate school performance and achieve the intended purpose of identifying where supports and interventions are needed. And then fourth, to draft proposed revisions to Bulletin 111 that address accountability for this school year at the appropriate time. And then the fifth bullet would be work with state legislators and BESI leadership regarding legislation proposed for 2021 regular legislative session concerning Louisiana state assessments and accountability for the 2021 school year. This ends my report today on the assessment and accountability updates for this school year. Mr. Watts.
Questions? Questions?
Is anyone opposed to receiving the report? Oh, we have some comments.
So from Dr. Janet Pope, representing the Louisiana School Board Association, in regard to item 3.1, would like to speak and provide information. Pope?
Thank you. Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you for your leadership and everything that you have been through as a leader. It's been a little over a year with COVID, and you guys have stuck together, worked with your boards, your teachers, your principals, your students, and your parents in your community. So I want to thank you for your leadership. As we always say at LSBA, leadership matters. Just want to also say that LSBA, as part of our guiding principles, is we believe in accountability. We also believe that it is important that we test our kids so we can see where our kids are at, so we can provide any remediation or other instruction for us to maybe fill in some of those gaps. At the same time, our kids may not have fallen behind, and we can provide some extracurricular moving forward, not just remediation. Just 2 points to note out, and again, appreciate the department's work and BESI and working with them as well. We may caution that requesting in advance of the assessment results provides a variety of rationales for the request. Requesting one after the data is available might limit some of the rationales, and you guys may want to discuss that today at the table. Also, too, as of April the 7th, 2021, there were approximately 17 states that requested an accountability waiver and/or a reporting waiver from USDOE for 2021, and so far 17 have received one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pope. Also, at this time, I'd like to call Mike Falk, representing LAS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Kathy and Kate, for all the hard work and allowing access and seeking input. As we look at the graduating seniors this year, many people are already planning their graduation ceremonies and stuff like that. So as soon as they can have it and they can coordinate that, that would be helpful. When we look at the recommendations that BESI has, one of the things that's come up in my discussions with superintendents is for many years now we've been getting simulations by individual districts that if this was in place, this is what your anticipated things. And I was wondering if you could address how is the department going to handle the projection of the assessments and getting the information to the district so they can kind of get a snapshot. That's one thing. The second thing is there was legislation passed last year that we are supposed to have the results by June 30th. And I think at the BESI meeting, it was mentioned that the results would not be available till the end of July. So I was wondering, how are you going to handle that with that piece of legislation.
So just a point on what Bessie's motion accomplished first and foremost. And just to not go into questions and answers in public comment period, but okay, Mr. Watts, I'd just like to reiterate. Bessie is basically saying students test, will get the results back. They're asking the department to then analyze the results, disaggregate the results, come back to Bessie at that point in time and say, here's what it looks like. And at that point, Bessie would make a decision on what they might intend to do with those results. You know, I haven't had a conversation with a single Bessie member that hasn't been understanding of the year in which we've all been in this particular year. So I know that they are very aware of the challenges of this particular year. Their request simply was, you know, have students take the test so that we can get the information, compile that information, come back with that information so we can get a better sense of where we are, and then they would have information to drive that particular decision. So that is, you know, that is what that was the motion that was approved by Bessie, and that's, you know, what we intend to do. And I would assume at that point in time, even to Superintendent Falk's question, you know, simulations would be involved with that because they're going to need to know, you know, what does this information look like, how does it compare to previous years, and what they might need to do with it.
Questions?
Okay, if anyone's opposed to the motion to receive, motion carries. Next item is on page 7, item 3.2, consideration of an update report regarding K-2 accountability. Need a motion to receive.
Motion. Second.
Yeah, Mr. Martin. Before we get started, I kind of failed to mention this. Mr. Falk did also. We do appreciate the support and just the communication line being open with you guys, with the department through this COVID situation. The fact that just being in a conference last week with superintendents from all over, we've been to school a lot and compared to a lot of states. And so we appreciate the openness you've had, but agree, disagree on certain things. You guys have been great in terms of communicate with us, let us know what's going on. We appreciate you guys and your leadership in getting us through this. So hopefully we're coming out of it. Now these discussions about what we're going to do afterwards. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Watts. So as we move into the next two items, just want to let everyone know Accountability Commission has also been taking up these particular items. These particular items were endorsed on Thursday at the Accountability Commission. The K-2 accountability piece, I believe, was unanimously endorsed by Accountability Commission. The high school piece was endorsed with the exception of there are a couple of items they want us to continue to look at and come back. And I do want to compliment Dr. Joseph for her service on the Accountability Commission and representing all of you because what she is doing whenever we meet, if you're not aware, is she's coming with information and she's saying, you know, superintendents across the state, you know, 87% agree with this and, you know, 27 agree with this. And so it's really helpful in terms of framing conversation. And even the numbers that she's coming with, I've been very impressed at how like student-centered those decisions have been and the data has been. So you have Dr. Joseph working hard for you on Accountability Commission, and I just wanted to call that out. Ms. Noel, if you want to present this report.
Yes, good morning again. I really want to start, before we go forth in framing K-2 accountability, I want to take us back to November when Dr. Brumley brought forth the research agenda for accountability this year. And in that particular presentation, he brought this data to us. And I think it really kind of builds the foundation for where we are and then where we would like to be. And so just to review here very quickly, a reminder that we rank 48th in the nation on fourth grade NAEP reading and math assessments. And then in 2019, that 26% of fourth grade students scored proficient or better on NAEP in reading compared to the national average of 34%. And then also in 2019, that 29% of fourth grade students scored proficient or better on NAEP math compared to the national average of 40%. Dr. Bromley's already mentioned that 46% of third graders scored mastery or better on ELA, and 43% of third graders scored mastery or better on math on 2019 LEAP 2025. And then also we want to point out that kindergartners coming in with our literacy screeners are scoring on or above level at 40.4% as they move into kindergarten. So just some data points to begin this conversation today and making sure we recognize where we are currently. With our K through 2 accountability priorities, we really are building two major frameworks, one of them being to inform and focus educators with very clear student outcomes in these grades, K through 2, and then also to provide objective information about school and site quality to parents and community stakeholders. And in developing these tools, we are seeking to have this cohesive set of expectations for teachers and school systems, and currently we do not have that. And then also to utilize a limited, coherent, efficient set of tools to monitor outcomes across school systems, to provide maximum consistency across grade levels to support the ease of use by educators, and then to reflect on academic goals of K through 2 in the way that schools are measured. Again, a lot of reporting to support this, a lot of tools to support this, and a lot of support planning as we move forward. With that said, we are really promoting the proposal of some operational goals around this K through 2 accountability system. One of them is to design a K through 2 accountability system that's aligned with academic strategy. And as we finished up last week, you started hearing a good bit about our literacy movements and some next steps in moving forward in improving literacy in the state. And so this system is meant to align and support that, some of those strategies there. And then also to bridge, as we currently have an early childhood accountability system and a grades 3 through 12 accountability system, and to bridge that system into one. And if you have a current K through 2 school in your district, you know that school has never owned its own performance score. It's always had to share a score since the beginning of our accountability structure. So part of this is to help overcome that to where they own their own score. And then we also will be piloting, refining, and scaling the K through 2 accountability with a full, we have added now the learning year into this timeline. We did not previously have this learning year in. That learning year would come in 22-23, and then the implementation of the accountability system in year 23-24. So some people are looking at that learning year as a field test year where we get to field test the components of this accountability system. And then also, as we're aligning this K through 2 accountability system, a third operational goal is to also implement an improvement strategy alongside this so that when we do receive ratings, that we're working toward an improvement plan to support literacy achievement for kindergarten in those K through 2 classrooms. We have designed a structure here that we propose building 2 measurements. Those measurements are an instructional quality measurement and then also a student literacy measurement. So those are the 2 measurements we are building out in this proposed accountability system. And one of our favorite graphics here, having that early childhood through 12th grade system built and filling in this missing gap here at K through 2 with literacy, class, and interest and opportunities. And so I'd like to now dig a little deeper into those two measurements. This first measurement would be the student literacy indicator, and this proposal is about devising a literacy indicator, not us devising it, but working toward receiving or gaining a literacy indicator for K through 2 students that would be administered at beginning of year, middle of year opportunity, and then end of year. And really wanting to recognize that right now you have a kindergarten through 3rd grade screening mandate for literacy, and that this particular indicator would take care of that mandate. And also for grade 3, we would use this indicator so that you have this seamless flow of data and a continual tracking from kindergarten to 3rd grade of reading. So while the 3rd grade indicator would not count in accountability, it is there to serve for the screening purposes that you right now have in place. So a couple of things here I want to point out is that the beginning of the year administration is meant to be identifying student needs. So that is what that indicator will be used for. The middle of the year indicator, that window of time, is not going to be considered a mandate, but is going to be considered an opportunity for you to use at your level to do a progress check from where kids were at beginning of year to where they are now in middle of year. And then the end of year indicator, those particular data points will be what we capture and move into the accountability system in two different buckets. You will have a performance bucket and you will have a growth bucket of data that will then roll into your performance results. I wanted to also point out that for the performance piece, we will be capturing data at end of year for all of these grades, kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd. For growth, that will be a measurement where kindergarten will be the baseline for growth, and then the first capture of growth data will be at 1st grade, and then again from 1st to 2nd grade. So these are the two measurements that will be built around the student literacy indicator. And one thing, since we've spoken about this before, I did put several bullets into your presentation today of what the student literacy indicator features are. First, it is going to be an instrument that is going to be selected via a competitive bid process. We actually can state this morning that RFP went out on Friday. We were excited about that. It has taken a little while to get that in place. That indicator also will calculate a reading composite score that will be used throughout every year of a student's life with us. It will serve as baseline, progress checks, summated at end of year. That will be the composite score piece that's used to administer a battery of literacy measures. Also, the literacy indicator will be constructed to yield a valid and reliable results. That's very crucial when we go to roll this into, first of all, a student's life and their literacy levels. That's crucial to have reliable and valid information. But it's also crucial when it goes and begins forming this reporting of performance out from your school. So this instrument has to meet all of that reliability and validity criteria in order to serve these purposes. It's also going to be an indicator that will be accessible for a wide use of and a full range of students. We also recognize that not only will be looking toward the serving of special ed and English learners, but also whether we will also be devising an alternate indicator in case it's needed for a student with significant cognitive disabilities. So again, really branching to reach a full or wide level or range of students. These, I've already mentioned that we're going to capture these results 3 times a year. You, of course, will be using the mid part of the year if needed. But in order to really produce what I call a quick turnaround of data, meaning, a teacher doesn't need to stay 6 weeks without having this data in front of them. They need to know these results pretty quickly so that instructional plans can be written to meet needs of students. We're looking for a web-based platform so that those reports can come out very quickly back to you all at your levels, and therefore decisions about how to move forward can be handled very quickly, and there will not be a delay in getting results to you. So those are some key features of the indicator, and then also wanted to share out just those multiple measures of literacy that will be reporting out on and results giving around, and again matching up to the foundation reading standards that are in place currently, and really building around support for all of this as we move forward. There will also be training resources to support this literacy indicator. There will be a wide range of training. People need to understand how to use this indicator, how to administer, and then also how to get the reporting back. Alongside this, and I'm not speaking about this a lot today because our academic strategy team will be supporting this a good bit, there will also be training for the science of reading, teaching the science of reading that will align directly up with this instrument and move forward as results come through. And what do we do with those results? How does teaching need to shift? What are some things we need to put in place? So again, that's another track that will run next to this particular training structure. And then I wanted to share out, well, let me just stop there for a second. I will take a break here before we go into instructional quality. And remember, we have 2 measurements. We have the measurement of literacy, and then we'll have the measurement of instructional quality. But before I go into instructional quality, I would just like to take a moment to see if you have any questions about the literacy proposal here.
First of all, as Mr. Watts pointed out, we applaud y'all. This has been a need, I think, for a long time, and we've all recognized it, so we're definitely appreciative of it. The only question that came to my mind as we're going through it is, just like we shared the NAEP results, and we've had the question about the alignment of Arlington 2025, ACT, and all these questions. My only question is in reference to once we get to the end of 2nd grade, or at whatever point in 2nd grade when we start looking at comprehension, and then 3rd grade, are we ensuring that I haven't seen the RFP that went out, but is there a component of that where they see the standards, what we assess
Yes,
for 3rd grade in 2025,
Yes,
to ensure that whatever we're assessing along the way meets those criteria?
Yeah, thank you. There are actually two steps to that. One of them is the vendor themselves have to do a correlation to our standards at that point. The second piece, though, is for it to count in our ESSA plan and our accountability system. We have to do an alignment study here through the Department of Education that involves educators and an actual group effort to publish this alignment study. So yes, sir, it'll be done in 2 different areas.
Dr. Noel, in reference to the administration of the literacy indicator, when you talked about it taking place 3 times during the year, the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year, and thinking about a lot of our 3 through 12 assessments being once a year, I thought about the cleanup process. Has that been discussed as far as an aggressive timeline for the cleanup process so that the results can be finalized so that we can actually
Right.
results?
Good question. So, of course, the beginning of the year for screening purposes and the middle of the year for progress monitoring purposes. a lot of that is for you locally, making decisions, so forth and so on. But when it comes to the capture of the data, we will have a data certification process, just like you currently have with LEAP 2025 and your grad cohort. So we will have that process built in. We expect that process to actually occur in a pretty quick turnaround, because if all of this is web-based, we don't have to wait 6 weeks for the reports of the data to come back. So some of that is going to be at a faster level or speed than it has been currently.
I think another important thing is we're probably going to actually learn the actual reading levels of our kids in K1 and 2, which, we do, I think 4 or 5 different screeners are approved across the state. There's not really standardization in how those are delivered. And so I think it would be accurate if someone wanted to challenge the results of those combined assessments all being together. And I think through a standardized process, we're going to have a much better sense of where we are and what those real deficits might be. The other part that Ms. Noel's not talking about, because her unit doesn't handle this, is just the professional development side of this and how other parts of the literacy strategy will run along this. On Dr. Chassain's team, they're doing a lot of work here around professional development. And frankly, in talking to teachers even, I've been surprised at the number of teachers who have said, hey, we want professional development around the science of reading. I was at Dr. Joffrey on one of his schools, and it was one of the things that some of his teachers peppered me about is the availability of professional development in those early grades around reading. So we're trying to step up in that particular place and provide some of that. The other part is with this indicator, we wanted it to be instructive as well. We wanted it to be a tool that you can gain information from and then make instructional decisions with that information immediately at the beginning of the year, whether that's grouping, whether that's a standard protocol, whether it's understanding deficits or where extensions might need so that you can do the things that you want to do. And it will have in that built-in middle of the year piece that you can use progress monitoring should you want to use that as well. So trying to use this as an instructive tool as much as anything else along the way.
Kathy, so I understand, I really like the idea of progress monitoring. I've always liked that idea, so I think that middle progress monitoring piece will be important at the local level. But so for accountability purposes, will the beginning of the year test and the end of the year test make a difference, or will it just be the end of the year compared to everybody else?
Just end of year.
Okay.
So we'll capture end of year for performance. You're like a composite score equals this performance. But then we'll also capture if a child came out of kindergarten with whatever score they had there, and then for when they end first grade, that would be considered their growth. And so that will also be captured. I'd also like to share with you that we're working with this request for proposal to also offer progress monitoring to you through this web-based system at any time you want it. So while we will have 3 administrations in terms of a window, we are looking for this vendor to support you all year long with, if you want to progress monitor within a week from the last one or 2 weeks. So it would be a system that you could use for any purpose through the year for progress monitoring events. It wouldn't have to be just within our window.
Thank you.
I do have a couple of comments. Personally, I think that the student literacy indicator is a strong piece, and I guess I'm a fan of you all including this in the K-2 accountability, unlike another piece that I know we will speak to later. As an elementary principal for 10 years, and then as my time working in school systems, what we have consistently noticed is that there is a decline in benchmark data in second grade when we begin to add the comprehension piece. So one of the things that I would sort of challenge the department just to consider is as we transition from first grade, where we're only looking at the oral reading fluency, how that comprehension piece is actually going to potentially show that there is a decline across the state. And so I think that is definitely something we need to consider as you all are moving forward and examining this piece of the accountability system.
Yes, sir, I know exactly what you're talking about. I watched it for many years out of the system I came from. So I will also say, though, that for us, I think part of the instructional strategy support plan in making sure the right tools, the right PD, all of those things are in place is an addition to what we've not had before. So, part of the hope, and Dr. Chasson's welcome to speak at this if she would like, but part of our hope is through our literacy support plan that we become better at when those children do move from up to that comprehension level. Are we noting that? Do we have the support for it? Are we making sure teachers are there supporting that? And do we have the materials and the curriculum to match up to that along with PD?
And then is oral comprehension really something that needs to be assessed in a timed fashion? I think that for many students, that timed pressure, it adds some anxiety and could definitely skew results. And I know that typically you have a minute or so to express what you just read, and that may be something we need to consider as well.
Thank you.
Many of us are securing curricular resources as we speak. Should we be concerned about our resources that we're securing now prior to the purchase of this agreement?
I'm going to let Dr. Chasson, do you want to answer that? That's a little bit out of my department in terms of materials and the support for literacy.
Yeah, I mean,
Or Dr. Brown?
yeah, I'm happy to step in. I think if we're talking about literacy resources in those lower grades, if it's something that's identified from our instructional review process, instructional materials review, and it's identified as high quality, it's going to align with what this would be measuring. But at the same time, we're also working with these vendors to try and strengthen those offerings that they have, just to make sure that we have enough of that science of reading embedded into those things. And I think, I can only go so far in this discussion because that's not what I do every single day, but I do know that there are definitely some gaps in some of them that we're trying to resolve.
And I do want to point out the indicator will match up to the standards, and I would expect that the highly effective curriculum would be matching those standards as well. So as we move through, we'll be watching that alignment and the matching of that. And I think currently those highly effective materials are doing that. Okay, any other questions?
Let me just do that, because I guess the same concern. Would we anticipate a change in some of the vetting for our early literacy curriculum that has already been approved? Or are we expecting that the already vetted curriculum resources for early literacy will already be in? I mean, I guess triggered something there. What if we can spend another $1 million something for some things? If there is some type of anticipation in the next year or 18 months, that some of the curriculum that is currently identified as Tier 1 curriculum may not necessarily be Tier 1 anymore based on this new.
So I'm going to answer it by saying this indicator is not being selected due to a weakness in curriculum. It is being selected to align to content standards, and there's no future discussion around changing those content standards that are already currently in
The expectation
place.
is that the standards aren't changing, and the curriculum that has been vetted and the new assessment.
Yes, so I want to make it clear, though, that the indicator is not being selected in a decision around curriculum. Is that making sense? Okay.
but look, I have conversations with you all frequently, members of your team. Our team does too, and we hear, oh, here's a weakness, here's a place to improve.
Yeah.
Sarah and I have had some of this conversation around guidebooks, for instance, and so we're looking at those things. We're trying to figure out ways, working with partners to improve those things. So that's just a continuous process we're working on. But I don't think that you're going to make an investment and then we're going to turn around and say, oh, wait,
Yeah.
you know, that's not the intent.
But I'll also say that this instrument may bring about the identification of some student needs that you didn't have previously. And whether or not your curriculum meets those student needs would be decisions that you start making. But that is not a decision on this end. It's more about what this indicator is telling you, and then what curriculum matches do you have to support those student needs. Now, between Dr. Bromley and I, did we answer your question? Thank you.
I think we feel good that if we purchase something that's based on standards, that we're good right now.
That's correct.
I mean, we may make some adjustments.
That's correct. That's correct. And I'll say this too, I don't think there's some needs out there that we don't know about yet. And when this does start coming, I would say that in the past role I've been in, I would say that if I started seeing some needs that I didn't have an awareness of previously, I would probably need an intervention structure of some sort that I didn't have previously. But that is not something we can identify today. Okay, all right. Then we'll move to the second measurement, which is instructional quality. And 3 bullets here in defining the instructional quality. The class tool will be the proposed tool here to measure instructional quality in kindergarten through 2nd grade classrooms. Every kindergarten through 2nd grade classroom would be observed using the class tool once in the fall and once in the spring. It is a proposal that this become the observation instrument and evaluation instrument in these grades. Of course, you have the ability to choose another instrument, but this instrument would be considered the evaluation instrument unless you want an alternative form. But for accountability purposes, this would be the form that we would use. A certain percentage of classrooms will be additionally observed by a certified third-party class observer. This would replace, if that particular third-party observation is significantly different than the local observer's scoring, then it would be replaced. This is what we call a reliability structure that we're building into the accountability system. I did want to share with you that many of you know that we've been in the business of class for several years now. For early childhood purposes, we've been using the class instrument for many years. And then in 2016, 2017, we began a kindergarten pilot. And as you can see over the years, we've expanded that pilot to where now 2nd grade classrooms are included as well. So a lot of work around this instrument in Louisiana, a lot of time, a lot of you working alongside your teachers using this instrument as well. Do want to share out that in this particular pilot, we have some initial findings that are very encouraging. First of all, we have already noted that through this pilot, we have districts reporting out that pre-K and kindergarten teachers are increasing their, what we call collaboration, to where they're sharing out not only best practices, but the use of the curriculum as they move forward to improve the teacher and student interactions. For one particular school system, the percentage of incoming 1st grade students reading on or above grade level increased from 42 to 54% between 2018 and 2019 in of one particular school system that was in this pilot. For another school system, within 9 months of starting class, most kindergarten teachers achieved what's considered the high proficient level on their particular observations. Currently, these are the early childhood scoring, I'm going to call it bands, that correlate out with achievement levels. As you can see right now, the high proficient level is 5.25 to 5.99. We will be reviewing through the pilot and also through the next year and also the learning year on where the right cut will be for high proficient in grades K through 2. So a lot of data runs, a lot of looking at this before we formalize where this will fall for K through 2. Also, I just really wanted to, you've seen this proposal, we're bringing it back before you today. Just a proposal of weight as we move in the K through 2 accountability formula of where we would have literacy and then where we would have class in terms of weight. And then also in meeting our ESSA plan, the 5% for interest and opportunities. One thing we want to talk through is for 21-22, how large scale next year's pilot will be. We're looking for a large number of administrators to be trained and certified as evaluators. We're also looking for a large number of teachers to begin becoming familiar with the instrument. And then we also are looking for a large number of schools to join the pilot. So even though you're not a part of the pilot, a lot of the training, a lot of the certifications will be available to you, but also the idea of becoming a pilot into next year has increased in terms of numbers as well. One other piece we want to bring out is the timeline. We have added a an additional year here. We originally had our implementation of K through 2 accountability at school year 22-23. We have shifted that to where we'll have a full-fledged learning year put into place in 22-23. We expect reporting to go out that year so you can take a look at your results and how they look for you before and to give yourself a chance at what I call the field experience and the field testing of this. And then we'll move into full implementation of K through 2 accountability at scale with stakes, that's school year 23-24. So this is our update report to you around K through 2 accountability, and I'll stop here to see if there are other questions.
So, Dr. Joseph.
Good morning. Just a couple of questions. First, funding for class training. Will there be any supports from the State Department regarding this area?
Yeah.
The answer to that is yes. As a matter of fact, I believe there is, quote, set aside money currently being looked at in terms of supporting this. And so we definitely know that through the piloting years, there will be money available for certifications and trainings.
So will this be continuous beyond the pilot, or
yes,
will the districts at some point have to take on that responsibility?
We believe we're looking to become providing a structure for what is considered a framework for you that would be implementation framework. So you could be implementing numbers of local observers, so forth and so on. But say 5-10 years from now, when you have to replace an evaluator, I'm not saying that particular structure would be a funded structure, but I'd also share out that it will be what I would consider, and I'm speaking out of turn here probably, considered to be an allowable federal support area for improvement or for supporting your teachers in your system.
My second question is that the class observation as a part of the accountability. So you have it as 45% of a school's accountability structure. However, teacher observations are not a part of the accountability structure for 3rd and 12th grade. So I just wanted to see if, I think that is one of the issues that superintendents have. And I just want to thank you all for sharing that information as I sent out those surveys, because there are 61% of superintendents that do agree with the accountability structure, and 39% do not. And I think that it's because of class being subjective. You know, I feel like it is a subjective type of tool. And then to have that as 45% of a school's accountability, you know, I think that raises some questions. So it's not consistent with the 3rd through 12th grade accountability.
Yeah, so a few things there. Number one is, this doesn't happen, or this has not really happened in many places across the country because it's hard to figure out. You know, people, have not figured this thing out, and I think it's a place where, especially considering where we stand, we have to try and figure it out, and so that's what we've been trying to do this year. One of the things I would point to is that ruler graphic that we've previously shown to the group. Right now in early childhood, all of our early childhood centers get a performance profile. They have an accountability system in early childhood. That is completely based on their class instrument and those class observations. Once you get to 3rd grade, it's this beginning of this testing process. And so what we attempted to do here, and we think it's the right thing to do based on all the conversations that we have had, and the fact that we haven't heard a better idea, is to try and bridge those two things together. So the way in which early childhood centers and our entire performance accountability model around early childhood looks is based on class, and then in 3rd grade we start the screening, the LEAP assessments, trying to find a way to use those two things, put them together for that particular space. So that is one of the things that I think matters there. Also, just wanted to call out when you're talking about class, we're not saying like you have to do additional observations. State law calls for 2. These could be, those two things, so it's not additional. The same thing with the literacy screener. That indicator would take the place of those things. So we're trying to sub in to places where you already have something going on. Another part about the class piece is the department has worked on this for some time. You can see that we've had, 4 or 5 years of lead up now to the place where we are. And whenever we have conversations with individuals in that, around this idea of what's developmentally appropriate, those individuals were not comfortable having the accountability system based completely on a, quote, test. And so they wanted another piece to put in there for the younger kids that was not just all a test. And so we had been doing, or the department had been doing all this work on class, so that's where we kind of found this compromise position of, bridging those two things together. And so that's where we, landed. Whenever you're talking about is something subjective, if we go with that argument, and I understand it, but if we go with that argument, then we're also saying all of the observations we do in the school year, are they reliable? And so when we say that, we're also putting into question our complete observation and evaluation cycle that we have for teachers as it is now. So, yeah, it's complicated, I get it, and you raise good questions.
My last thing is, and just for clarity, this K-2 accountability piece, is this going to be separate by itself, like 3rd through 8th, 9th through 12, or will it be included in the 3rd through 8th structure? I think that's a question that needs clarity.
Okay, so I will speak about where we are today and how we blend indices to come up with one school performance score. And then I will speak about trying to stay as close to what we have normally done and not veer from the formulation of a school performance score as we do it today as much as possible. So this has a little bit to do with the configuration of a school. So if you are in a school configuration that has more than one accountability system in it, there has to be a way to first decide on what that particular accountability system score is, and then bring those scores up and then take them across the grade configuration to where you have one number. So I'm just going to throw a couple of examples out here. If you're in a grade, I'm going to say grades 3 through 8 school, you have one accountability system there. It is the 3 through 8 accountability system. But if I'm in a K through 12 school, and I am that's the configuration of my school, I currently have a grades 3 through 8 system in that school and a grades 9 through 12 system in that school. So you would take the grade 3 through 8 population and you would design a grade 3 through 8 SPS, and then you would go over to the 9 through 12 population and you would design a grades 9 through 12 SPS. In order for the school just to have one SPS, we look at the total population of kids. We find what percentage of it was grades 3 through 8, and that would be the weight that is put on the grades 3 through 8. That would be the factor. And then the same for 9 through 12. It would have a certain weight as it rolls up into the one SPS. We have not designed this formula yet for the addition of K through 2 into it, but I would expect that we would want to stay as close to that mathematical structure that we already currently have, so that when K through 2 rolls into this school, you'll have a K through 2 index, a 3 through 8 index, and a 9 through 12 index. And then each of the weight factors that go up into the total SPS would be dependent on the population of students in those grade bands. That is going to probably be our proposal, to stay with that. Of course, it'll be up to Bessie ultimately how they want that to turn out, but we would expect to stay as close to that formula as possible.
Thank you. So you'll have, if you have a K2 school, it'll have its own
K
accountability.
through 2 will have its
Right.
own accountability score. K through 1 would have its own accountability score. Those schools have been asking for their own performance scores for quite some time, as long as I can remember. That once they started having to share a score, it was very important that they have their own. They feel their work is special to them and would like to have a record of performance.
Yeah. But if it is a K5 school or a
K5 would
it
have-
be operating like a combination.
That's correct. That is correct. That's right.
Thank you.
Dr. Joseph, yes.
Yeah, first of all, I certainly appreciate the K2 accountability, because I have 3 schools that they've always had to take on the scores of schools that I believe were lower than what they were capable of doing anyway. So we certainly appreciate the fact that the department is doing this. In the course of the conversation, was any consideration or thought or conversation ever given to the numeracy, the math process of this? Because we find as we move into the lower and even the middle schools that our kids are struggling. I think reading is so critical. I think that's number one. But real closely behind that now is what we're expecting our kids to do mathematically, and I'm not seeing that there's a whole lot in that with the K2.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Coker. You're right. Yeah, I mean, we have talked about that a lot, but we also know this is big. Like this is going to be a big process. It's going to be a lot to get done. It may be that, down the road that's something we want to take up and explore and look at those things. We're just thinking about the lift that this will be and getting this off the ground successfully. And yeah, we did, we had to make a priority decision, and priority decision was made around literacy. And also you have the screeners are already in place, and so that felt too like it was it was something we're already accustomed to doing. And so it was a big lift already. Now I will say that the instructional environment side, so that class side, like, to me, that should improve outcomes across the board, you know, in terms of any content area, because that's looking at teacher-student interaction, that student environment in which they're learning. And so, you know, it makes sense to me that if that improves, content area understanding should improve in everything else as well. But yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of conversation around that. It's just, I think that might be more than we can take on at one time.
Okay, so there is a possibility though that out there over the course of several years, we may see that class could be reduced somewhat and math be inserted somewhat in that too. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, math,
Yeah, I mean,
we need to get through the pilot, but.
Yeah, and we're talking about implementation, the first implementation year and full implementation, 23-24. So if you're talking 23-24, you're going to be a couple of years at least before you see the ramifications of that. So you're talking, you know, 26-27, and so we certainly have time to have those conversations between now and then.
Very good. Thank you.
I think you all just about nailed every piece of this almost perfectly. The one major concern I have is around the use of the class observation tool as part of an accountability system. While our pre-K schools do receive the feedback, the information, it's just that. It's not something that the entire school system or a school is judged upon. In review of the class data, instruction continues across the state and in my district to be the lowest scoring indicator. And the environmental pieces consistently are in the high proficient to excellent range. I believe that a third-party evaluator coming in devalues the principal as the instructional leader of the school. When a third-party observer comes in and that score automatically, regardless of whatever situation, takes over the principal's score. So I think that is something that we have worked on as a state and as a school district to ensure that our principals not only are managers, but instructional leaders. And having a third-party score automatically devalues that instructional leader. It was stated that the state has put lots of investment, monetary as well as professional development around the class observation, but I believe that districts have also invested in whatever instrument it is that they're using. Iberville proudly uses the NIET rubric for kindergarten through 12th grade. We have piloted the class observation tool in 2 of our schools previously, and at the conclusion of the pilot, both of the principals along with the elementary supervisor felt it was best to go back to the NIET tool because it was a more well-rounded approach and it focused much more on instruction rather than just the classroom environment or primarily the classroom environment. To a comment earlier, and I agree that literacy does have to be the focus. It's the largest indicator of student success later on, but perhaps considering something around math could be a better use of accountability than the class observation.
To piggyback a little bit, my question would be, we don't use third-party outside evaluators for any other grade level or content. What is the necessity for having the third-party class evaluator come in, or even the local district person aside from the principal? I just need to know the justification for that.
So we do use third-party observers in our early childhood accountability system. And so it's patterned much like that. And it is there to be a security structure for what's considered a reliable observation. So the data behind that, the research behind that, is that it becomes the mark of validity.
But couldn't we use that same argument to start doing that for all grade level content areas across the board?
Absolutely. That is, I think, where Dr. Boning was a minute ago, that none of your observations outside of this are considered, have a third-party protocol. So they all could be in question right now. So this is really meant to support the validity of an observation.
And the only reason I bring it up is I think what many of us are grappling with is and speaking for our principals, is the logistics of what they already deal with for those that are being observed with class. The principal, the district level, and the third party person. Now, if we think about all of our K through 3 or K through 2 teachers doing that, the logistics of that, wherever these people are going to come from, I assume the
PCAR Center.
This is going to be tons more people, roving throughout the state. I just, again, because that's the way it is now, that's our justification that we have to do it?
Well, there are some systems, and especially in the NIET world, where you have what's considered a shadow scoring, a reliability check, a time for that to actually occur every year for you to actually say your results are reliable.
Yeah, we have to do that as part of the evaluator training.
Correct.
Yeah.
So very much the same, but an extension to a third party outside of your system to just add to the reliability structure of it being a reliable observation. So very much the same idea of a shadow score, but again, just at a deeper level of it's outside of your realm, it's a third party coming in. Another example, when assessment goes on in your schools, you probably every once in a while have a third party monitor come in. That third party, they're monitoring your protocol, they're monitoring your security. Again, that's considered a third party monitoring. So this is very much the same idea. It's a third party monitoring of your observation process.
Yeah, I think we understand that process, except this would be mandated as part of
That's correct.
Teacher's evaluation. So I think that's the big difference here.
Also, Mr. Powell, we're not talking about every teacher. It's just going to be a portion of kind of under this monitor field that will be third-party observers that go out, and instead of where now you have the testing monitor who may be external occasionally, what you would have occasionally is a third party, which is a check and balance on the system itself.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So not every teacher.
No, sir, it will not be. It would be a certain percentage of teachers.
And the scores aren't thrown out unless there's a big difference.
Correct.
Between them. It's not like the third party is automatic.
No, not at all.
The principals that have expressed their concerns to us, they feel that, let's say they do their observation at the beginning of the year. And of course, they give valid feedback, and then that teacher has an opportunity to improve. Then the third party observer comes in, and it devalues their observation, because then, of course, we want the teacher to improve. And if that teacher in fact improved, then their score seems to not compare favorably to the third party observer.
Yes, I can identify very clearly with where you are, serving as a local observer and then having that third party, that situation happen for us. But I will let you know there's going to be an appeals structure here that would support a review of that particular situation. And we also are already starting in our early childhood center settings for that to not be the way it used to be. And I'm speaking without a lot of knowledge on the early childhood side, but I know that particular incident where there's an improvement, which is what you wanted, is not going to be what's considered a ping on you or ding on you. It's actually going to be noted that that is what should have happened. And so that won't be any kind of replacement structure out there for beginning of the year. Nor would that observer have to go through any kind of additional trainings or any kind of professional development structure, because that would not be a flag situation.
I do understand a lot of concerns that our superintendents have with the class. What we try to do in our system is have two different administrators observe the same teacher. So, you're not getting one administrator doing half of your teachers and the other doing the other half, and you see a discrepancy. We balance that out. Same thing with this. I'm just looking at our school system. We have all of our kindergartners go to one school. So we have one school with 400 kindergartners, okay? So that one class person that comes in to observe is going to give that score for that, could be the person who gives the score for that whole school. And of course that's far-fetched, because there's other things involved. But the issue is that the reliability between the different observers from the PCARD Center. Are we going to look also at those folks? Because it depends on who comes into your school to observe, and if it's just that one person, I know there's a lot of schools that they're going to have to visit. There's going to be a lot of them. So it's just like our principals and administrators in our own district. It depends on who shows up at your school. If you have one that tends to be a little bit more, should I say easy on their observation, or you have someone coming in that's hard-nosed. Depends on that observer that comes in will determine what your score looks like. And if their score is going to overshadow the administrators in your school, then I think we need to also look at the reliability of the observers coming from the PCARD Center,
Yeah.
just like we do internally with our own system.
Yes. My understanding is the PCARD Center does watch reliability. I'm not there, I don't know how that's done, but I just want to share an example with you, especially at a school with 400 kindergarten students. So you're looking at a large number of teachers there. I don't know how many, but I'm just going to use a number, say 40 to 50 kindergarten teachers. Those teachers are, say 50 teachers, that's 100 observations a year, being done by a local observer. So that's 100 scores that go into your accountability score, done by local observers. Of those 100 different data points, I'm going to say 5 or 10 of them may have a third-party score attached to it. That third-party score will end up going through a matching structure. For instance, there are 3 domains on that class instrument. Every one of those domains will go through a check with a third-party scoring. One domain may be replaced by a third party, which will not shift the entire observation. It would be just one domain. That rolled in to 100 scores. I need you to understand the minuteness of the overall impact. While I believe the validity for your school is crucial, and for it's actually a protection structure for you as a principal or as a local observer to say, hey, we're valid. Our stuff's matching up pretty well. I just don't want you to think that of 100 observations, third party is going to come and wipe all that out. That is not what's going to happen. It's going to be very, very small in number, but also very, very important for you at your school level, at your district level, to say these are valid, we are valid observers. And very much like the same thing with testing right now, the protocols that are set up. As you know, what you have to go through as a superintendent if you have a violation on one of your campuses, the investigation that has to take place, all of those pieces are there so that when the day is over, you can say your performance score is valid. So that's really what this is about.
don't want to look at that side of the room anymore. I'm just kidding. Dr. Joseph, yes,
Just
ma'am.
one last thought. So I could speak to the training that's received to be a class observer, because I went through the training. So everybody, even at the P-Card Center, we all do that same type of training.
Yes.
So could you consider maybe looking at just, so when the principal does the observations of all of the teachers at the school, then anybody who's at the district who's going through the training can be that person that can come in and provide that.
You're asking if that could be a third party?
Yeah, rather
Yeah.
than P-Card Center, because we've all gone through the same level of training.
Yeah, currently the P-Card Center is being looked at for third-party observers, mainly for a lot of different reasons. They have served in that capacity for some years now, but also just what we're trying to do is supply some structure to the system. And to me, Dr. Joseph, it really relieves a burden from the district on having to be that third-party observer. It doesn't say it can't happen, but again, it's how do we keep the district performance score valid? The district is going to get a performance score out of this as well. So there really needs to be a third party outside of the district for it to be stated valid for the district performance score as well. So nothing is out of question here. I mean, you could do that, but it again adds to a question of validity at the district level. And so we have to rework some structures for that to happen. It's just that right now, the third-party contracting that we have in place is there for us to start with, and really to give us a good run through our field testing and through our piloting years. And then we need to watch this as we move through. We haven't settled yet on a percentage amount for third parties. We don't know yet what that number is. We need to watch that and pilot that as well. We also really are looking at what's called flags every year. You get some of this if you ever go through a transcript review. You'll possibly get flagged if you're going through any kind of audit. So who's to say your first year out in accountability, you have no third party like trumps. Nothing trumps any of your scores. We actually might reduce the number of third party observers that go to you in the second year. But if you're a district that got flagged a good bit, there's a reliability concern there, we would shift more third-party observations to that particular district. So the idea here is to reward you with you being reliable, and that is where the district support should come in, is to really provide shadow scoring all throughout the year so that you can maintain a sense of reliability. And we do that a lot with our NIET rubric in terms of a lot of that work too, like that.
Sorry. And I'll just preface this by also saying that I love the K2 accountability system. I mean, this is where we need to go, and I'm excited about it. I will say that 45% on the school performance score is a concern to me. It still feels very subjective, even if you have some small percentage of third-party people coming in. Still feels very subjective. So from district to district, it just feels like there could be some challenges with such a large percentage of the school performance score. And then the second piece I would just ask about is just using class. And I would just start off by saying not to let a 5-year investment from the department be the reason that we go forward with it. If it is absolutely the best instrument, yes, let's go with it. If we get past the first part, which I say only 45%. But I know, and I'm not a K2 literacy specialist or a class specialist, so don't ask me questions about either. But I just know from our leadership team, it's very cumbersome. And is that the best use of our administrators' time? Obviously, that sounds like a loaded question. Yes, their time needs to be spent on instruction, but the amount of time they are spending on those observations, and I think, as Scott said, them going in together, like at our kindergarten school, we have a principal and AP. They do most of their observations together now for the class. And it's just so cumbersome. And is it focused on student outcomes versus teacher outcomes? And I think that goes back to Hattie's visible learning. it doesn't matter what the teacher's doing ultimately, although it does. It's ultimately about the outcomes for the students. So, and obviously what the teacher does leads to that. But I love the K-2 accountability system. Class is our biggest challenge. I mean, honestly, I'll just say that from a K-2, because we know with pre-K the challenge that it has been. So I would just ask you not to let the 5-year investment be the reason we're moving forward with it. If it's the best option, yes, let's do it. But that also asks you to go back and look at the 45%, because I think it's very subjective when you try to compare districts in that manner. Thank you.
So I would just want to throw a couple of things in there. Also, 100% support of the K-2 accountability. Obviously, class is a concern. I do get this, that we have to start somewhere. We have to do something. So I'm all for it. Let's move it forward. And the good thing is that we do have time with this not being fully implemented to 23, 24. Class being the biggest issue even for me. And I guess for me would be that these observers have to be certified every year. Is another piece of that I would struggle with. Every year you have to be recertified. Can become cumbersome. So that's my understanding of class and for my folks, because we do this also in our Head Start pre-K. And so I guess, but from one point for us, just to understand, I guess, the third-party reliability piece, this has to go to Bessie, it has to go to our legislators. We have to have something in place. Think about this from where our legislators are, maybe even where Bessie is. You have a principal now that's determining 45% of their school performance score. There has to be something, some oversight to that, right? I get it, it is subjective, but that principal now has really good input into the score of that school. So I get that piece of it, I really do, I kind of understand that. But the class itself is a struggle for me. But I do understand that third party part, because there has to be some reliability and not just our principals determining the score of the school. So that's just those, but I do struggle with that piece, the class piece, and would like some more consideration of it also. So, anybody else?
That's just one thing. And I'm probably just not thinking clearly. I echo everybody else. I think a K-2 accountability system is actually long overdue. So we need to hurry. At the same time, we got to do this thing right. I'm not completely convinced. I'm not sold on the fact that observations and things like that have to be a part. I understand you're saying they already are part of the early childhood, and we understand that. But they're not a part of the 3 through 12 system. And I really wish that we could find a way to be confident in measuring K-2 performance using student outcomes, period.
That's it? Pretty quick for you. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right. We do have a couple of comment cards, so I would call up Ms. Wendy Bodwin from the LSBA. I'd like to speak.
Again, I just want to say thank you to all the superintendents for your comments and concerns that you brought out today. They really helped clarify some questions and concerns that the LSBA had about these proposals, so thank you for that. I just want to provide a little bit of information that will likely echo what most of you have said here today. The LSBA did survey school systems about some of these changes and the particulars about these changes, and just want to give you the information that we received back from our survey. So in an almost 70% response rate, we do know that our school systems have approximately 85% of them who are in favor of K-2 accountability. So we are here to stand with you and in support of K-2 accountability. We also want to advocate on behalf of what school systems have mentioned they would like to see as indicators in the K-2 accountability. So when we surveyed our school systems, the top 3 indicators that they said would be the best measures of K-2 for their school systems in this order were literacy, numeracy, and growth. There was much less support from our school systems in class observations. In fact, only slightly more than 28% of our school systems who responded indicated that class was going to be the most effective measure of K-2 in their school systems, and so they would like some reconsideration of that particular indicator. What I'd also like to mention is there are two concerns that some school systems have brought to our attention, and when this proposal moves forward to Betsy, we would like to see the department have a discussion about it or provide information related to these two concerns. They are both derived from slide 12 from the presentation, numbers 2 and number 3. So in number 2, the slide 12 indicates that there would be full implementation with stakes in 23-24 school year. One of the concerns school systems would like the State Department to address when this policy goes to Betsy is, what are those stakes, since this system is sort of a merge between what's happening in early childhood, pre-K, and 3 through 12th grade accountability. It is a system that actually will be measuring both student and teacher outcomes, which is sort of an unusual piece for accountability. And so school systems are wanting to have a conversation about what are those stakes that the department is talking about. Are they going to be different than traditional stakes that are attached to 3 through 12? And having that conversation they find is important when designing the system, because the system is designed for the stakes, and so they want to make sure those two conversations happen together. The second question is about number 3 on slide 12, which is that the improvement strategy is aligned to ratings. And so some school systems have asked us to just ask the department to have this conversation when you present policy about what the improvement strategy might look like and how that improvement strategy might impact local instructional decisions. The LSBA is committed to retaining local autonomy, and so our school systems do have a question, do want to have a conversation about whether those strategies aligned to ratings are going to take into consideration the local autonomy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Wendy. And also, Dr. Ed Consian, Superintendent at St. James Parish.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Superintendents strongly support the K-2 initiative. Let us not forget that psychometricians like to dance on the backs of teachers. Now, to talk to our teachers, I agree with you, Dr. Fountain, that when the class people come in, their way of teaching changes. And they don't use direct instruction, which is so important to oral fluency. When you look at these indicators that you are assessing, let's not lose the sight of what goes on in that classroom regarding teaching reading as a fundamental. So please don't just dance on the back of teachers. I thought a few weeks ago, Superintendent Boche did a great job when Senator Fields talked about our teachers coming back and gave an incredible way to get our schools going. Let us not get carried away with letter grades and all of that. Let's be grateful for where we are. Dr. Brumley's done a great job. There's an idea of out with the old, in with the new. We have a great thing going in front of us. Let's not get caught up in letter grades, but let's start looking forward as Dr. Brumley is doing.
Other comments? So I would just close this segment of just by saying I'm proud that we're doing something for K-2 accountability. Very few have done this across the country, and I think we see why. It is complicated. This is a difficult and complicated issue to get this right. I appreciate the timeline, the idea that these things are going to be piloted, and that work will go into it. And even with my concerns for class, I don't have an answer for something that's any better right now. And I wish I did. I do have those concerns, but I don't know of anything that's better out there. So I would just like to say that, and I will be looking and try to find something that way. So we appreciate the work that y'all done on that. Appreciate you hearing our concerns, and I know that you guys will look into that and review that, and hopefully we just come up with a great process for our kids. So if nobody else has anything.
Yeah, anybody opposed to the motion to receive? Next item then is item 3.0. Yeah.
I would say do one thing as opposed to this. Doc, do you know, Dr. Brumley, is this going to Bessie in April?
No, not April.
Not the April meeting.
We have an additional accountability meeting scheduled for May. We have some items around interest and opportunities we have to discuss at that May accountability meeting. And then also in this next section around high schools, accountability has asked us to come back with a few things around there. So we have a May accountability meeting, and then June, our intent is to be able to present this in June, at the June Bessie. Which reminds me about one of the comments Superintendent Falk mentioned earlier around the timeline for reporting this particular summer. Just for clarity, the reason why we're saying the scores are going to potentially be a little late this year is because we extended the testing windows later, so everyone who started the school year a little later would have the opportunity to have a later testing window. So when you push that back, everything gets pushed back a little bit.
And so I get that. I'm not really concerned. The accountability piece being pushed back is a good thing. I guess I was more asking about the 2020, 2021 structures for accountability measures and letter grades. Would that item go to April, or is that going to be in May also?
You're talking about for the present school year?
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's an agenda item to discuss it again at the upcoming BESI meeting. But the motion from the March meeting is to test and then bring that information back to BESI. And so we won't be able to do that until summer at the earliest.
So there's a discussion item though for the April BESI, the next BESI meeting.
I believe there is an agenda item around 2020-21 accountability. But I'm not sure. We already have a motion that tells us what we have to do, so I don't know if there's what could come from that particular agenda item. It is just on the agenda.
Thanks.
Moving on to item 3.3 on page 15, consideration of an update report regarding high school accountability. Need a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Dr. Roman, back to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn the presentation over to Ms. Noel and remind everyone I'm putting checks by your name when you say something I don't agree with. Moving to page 3.
He has a couple of pages already filled with it. We'd like to lead into this section with actually just naming out, we're going to have 3 particular parts to this update report. Andrew Shackett is going to cover our ACT workkeys update report. We have Ken Bradford joining us today for the strength of diploma update, and then I'll take us into the third part of this accountability. So yeah, we're going to engage you with 3 different speakers since you've been listening to me for a while. So I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everybody. This first update is around our discussion we've been having as part of our research agenda around the ACT Workkeys Index. All of these slides should be familiar if you were at the last meeting where we brought this item. There's no additional information here. We are just reiterating that this is something that is continually on our mind and that we are continually investigating on our end. And what is driving that first and foremost is the fact that we know there is a consistent decline in our state's ACT average composite score over the last several years. And that is a key priority for this agency. Since 2013, as you all know, all students have been able to access the ACT assessment, and then additionally, we introduced workkeys into the picture a few years after, and now all Jumpstart Diploma Pathway students have a paid opportunity to access the workkeys assessment. For both of these assessments, systems have full discretion in how many opportunities a student has to take those assessments in terms of retest, and that is not something that the department mandates in any way, shape, or form. This is our current ACT's workkeys index points structure. So you'll see right now the points begin at an ACT composite score of 18 or a silver workkeys. And right now we, as you all know, offer points for workkeys for all students regardless of their diploma pathway or any other student characteristics. What we have seen in our research, and again this is a slide we presented last time we brought this item, is that we have seen what to us seems like a somewhat troubling trend in how the number of students who are taking the workkeys assessment has steadily increased, but particularly among students who are not on a Jumpstart Diploma pathway who are accessing that paid opportunity, which indicates to us that systems are allocating a good amount of funds to support this additional opportunity for students, which we find interesting and worth investigating and exploring with you all. I brought this up last time, but I'll bring up again that in our minds we suspect that the reasons why in this graph, which we presented before, the 1920 numbers look so similar to the 1819 numbers is because we ended the assessment window last school year due to COVID, and we expect that those numbers would have increased were it not for the closure of schools in March. Again, this is data we presented to you all, but this is the numbers we're seeing in terms of how many students are accessing the workkeys assessment, the cost of the workkeys assessment over time as it shifted from workkeys 1.0 to workkeys 2.0, and what that cost structure looks like at both the LEA and state level. At the Accountability Commission meeting last week, we brought this table for their consideration, which outlines 2 key changes to this index in our accountability system. The first change is around the starting point structure for the index. So you'll see in the second row, or really the third row, where it says 17, we proposed to that commission for 60 points to be earned for an ACT composite score of 17, as that aligns with the TOPS Tech opportunity that students can access. And then similarly, we've proposed to shift the nature of the ACT Workkeys Index such that only students on the career diploma track, as opposed to all students, would be eligible to earn points for their Workkeys assessment scoring in our ACT Workkeys Index. And we proposed as part of that conversation last week that that shift would begin in the 2022 to 2023 school year. The results of that commission meeting were that we continue to have an ongoing conversation around this with that commission. So this is an item that we will continually bring up with them, as we are very troubled by our state's ACT results. And as a result, we will continue to keep you updated on that conversation. And to remind you all, this chart, which we presented last time, shows how scores would shift across the state in terms of the school performance score in a world where we only counted Workkeys assessment results for students on the career diploma as opposed to all students, and we see a negative shift. We notice at the far end we have some systems that are heavily relying on Workkeys for TOPS University students, meaning a school performance score would drop at the far end to the left by 10 or more points, which is a very significant drop. And then as we get closer to the right of the graph, we see how a change in school performance score would shift under that removal of that scoring mechanism. And then this last slide I'll present, again, this is something we've presented before, is how, based on the most recent data we have, the 2019 SPS, how scores would shift if this proposed policy that we brought to this Accountability Commission were in effect at that time, meaning we award 60 points in the ACT Workkeys Index for a composite score of 17 on the ACT, and if we remove Workkeys from the scoring structure for TOPS University students. So again, the proposal that we brought was not around removing the opportunity for students to take the Workkeys assessment, rather just how it aligns with our scoring mechanism in our accountability system. And what we find promising in this simulation is that we do see positive shifts for a good number of schools based on the adding of points for 17 in the index. We also see a shift less to the left in the negative and more towards the right, even with that removal of Workkeys for TOPS University students, which to us we think is a promising trend. But again, the outcome of that commission meeting last week was that we are going to continue engaging in that conversation with our commission. And that concludes my section of this presentation. Any questions for the group before we move on? Dr. Fields?
I just want to make a comment to all the superintendents that during the meeting, we had the superintendent from Vermilion Parish, Mr. Byler, to come in and talk about the structure of how ACT is scored. Can you go back to that slide with the chart?
Sure.
So here, you know, the big point is, and I know that we all had that discussion before, is that in order for a student to earn 150 points, they have to score a perfect 36 on the ACT. And so what he proposes is that that point structure is grouped like all of the other ones are across the accountability. So in other words, for example, you have like maybe a 32 to 36 would be worth 150 points, and so forth. So that's an issue that came up during the Accountability Commission, and just wanted to bring that before this group of superintendents, so you could be aware of, you know, where people are feeling about that. I'm sure you all may have some similar concerns. Also, the second thing is that if ACT is king, shouldn't we consider looking at our standards and other testing to be aligned to ACT? So I just want to throw that out there. Maybe you all have some other comments or concerns about it.
Kelly, are you referring to like BOCs?
Yes, all the testing and all the kind of,
You're talking about high school?
right, yes, ma'am. Because when you look at it, there are some items that are on ACT that's not being taught within the, in some subjects. So, if we're going to use ACT, we need to give our students every opportunity to be successful by making sure everything is aligned from whatever appropriate grade level all the way through.
I know this is just a presentation. I just want to reiterate the same points that I think I made last time. I don't know if there's been any consideration for, we don't want to count the ACT for those that are on the top university pathway, but we don't want to count the workkeys for those that are on the top university pathway. But is there going to be any consideration for not counting the ACT for those that are on the Jumpstart pathway on the accountability side? And then secondly, does the department realize, or is there some trackable data that shows how many of these students that may be on a top university pathway, but also are earning an industry-based credential in an advanced area, and while they scored well on the ACT, they're going to work in a field where there seems to be this question now that's coming up is we say we're preparing students for, or we're focused on preparing students for college and or career, yet there seems to be a movement back towards where we're going to, in the accountability structure, really focus more on the college piece. Almost like there's a shift back of what we call calibrating or what have you.
Yeah, so on your first point, yes, we have considered that, and that has been part of our internal conversations, but at this time, that has not been something that we have presented as part of a proposal that we would see from Bessie. On the second point, credentials are recognized regardless of diploma type and the strength of diploma index. So in that particular index, regardless of what pathway you're on, you would still get, for an advanced credential, 150 points. It just wouldn't be reflected in our ACT workkeys index.
I was going to add, right now at 21 on ACT is an A. So we're talking about being an A. At 21 is an A. So we're talking about points of 150, that's A plus. So at 21 already is an A. The strength of diploma is where I think you'll see in the next presentation with Mr. Bradford, we were pretty deliberate in trying to make sure that, if you're on that, if you're seeking career endorsements, they are of equal value to if you're going on that university track. That was something that we tried to achieve from the beginning. Andrew, I wanted to ask you, because we talked a lot about this, but if you look at the slide on slide 27, so we see that for several years we have an uptick in ACT. Students all begin taking it, then we see 2013, 2014, the 19.2, the 19.4, the 19.5, the 19.6. So we see this consistent increase. And then we hit 2017, 2018, and then we see the opposite begin. So then it goes from that consistent increase to a consistent decrease. 19.3, 18.9, 18.7. So whenever you're looking at data with as many data points as we have access to, which is the volume of statewide scores, that tells you that something systemically probably has happened. So I just wanted Andrew to kind of explore or share out what happened here.
So there is a timing. There is timing between when workkeys came into play in 15-16 as a part of accountability and when we start seeing these declining scores over time. Obviously, as you all know, there are lots of things that influence an end result like a state average or a school performance score, and there's not necessarily one thing that absolutely determines that. However, in our research that we've done internally, in looking at the connection, we do find the trend we see in the uptick of assessments taken on workkeys by TOPS University students somewhat troubling given the opportunities that it may provide for those students relative to an ACT composite score and where that works in the TOPS structure.
So I flipped to this slide because the same years that you're seeing the decline are the same years of uptick in the number of workkeys assessments given to university pathway students. And then when you go to our simulations, you'll also see that when we remove the workkeys from the university pathway students and you add your 17 back in, the scoring begins back up. And so we believe the hypothesis here is that with students, and by the way, remember, we have 7,000 students that missed that TOPS opportunity by not having the ACT component. That was the only thing that caused them to miss that. They are the same students that are falling in this 16, 17, 18 range. And the hypothesis is instead of pushing them for another ACT scoring, another ACT preparatory structure of sorts, instead, because of the performance scoring the way it is in our accountability system, the systems or schools may be choosing to go to the workkeys alignment instead of looking to see if this is a possible student for an improvement in ACT scoring. So all of the statistics we're looking at are pointing to the workkeys uptick at the same time the ACT decline is in place. And of course, the concern would be is what decisions are being made locally at that point? What decisions would be being caused by the accountability structure versus a possible ACT opportunity? And that is where this discussion is forming. Again, it's a hypothesis. The numbers are in front of you. But it then also in the same token would be this understanding that a university pathway is basically saying, I want this outcome. The student is saying, I want this outcome. The career diploma pathway would be saying, I want this outcome. And yes, things happen after graduation, things change after graduation. We recognize that. But part of the job of the school would be, if you've chosen this pathway, we need to do our very best in supporting you for the end result. And so that's where this bigger discussion falls into play. Again, really just putting numbers together. We know we have a problem. We know we have a decline. The question is, what can we start looking at and forming up to make this better?
On the 1.6 decline, which is on page 34, which is the, just the simulation based on the way the policy, presently states, that average 1.6, I believe it's 70% of high schools are rated A and B as of right now, in comparison to 40% of elementaries or K-8 configurations. That 1.6 decline is under present policy and the way that we are responding in our schools to that present policy. If you had a shifting, which is what we're proposing, that's when you begin to see the response to the new policy, and then actions at the system and school level respond to the new policy. And that's where we believe that we'll begin to see, that increase, or we go back in the direction we all want to go.
We also plan to track these number of students that are missing that TOPS opportunity. Our hope is to fill that gap to where it's not 7,000 in the future, that it becomes a much smaller number. So that will be another tracking point as we move forward.
I appreciate all the studies and the work of the data collection and the pulling together the data to give the information. Y'all give the information. I'm concerned that we are assuming that the offering of work keys is what is affecting the decline in ACT. We observed the data, And I'm wondering, is that enough data to conclusively determine that the reason for the decline in ACT is because of workkeys? And I guess it's pretty obvious. I'm a superintendent that believes the workkeys are important. I remember several years ago, we fought diligently across the state to allow workkeys to be a part of the graduation process for a sector of our students, which I think is very important. I don't know exactly what the recommendations or it's in the minds of the Accountability Commission, which I think meets again on the 3rd, and then after that, I understand Bessie is going to make some type of decision. Am I correct on that? So I'm concerned that we might be at the juncture whether we're going to isolate or eliminate a sector of our population, student population, from the workkeys being part of the graduation process. And I also know that I live in a part of the country that a lot of the businesses, those industries and others that, particularly big companies like Royal Martin, they use and depend on and appreciate the school systems using workkeys. That provides important data for them. So I'd hate to see, this is one superintendent's opinion, I think there's value in workkeys, and I think it's important as a means whereby a sector of our students can exit high school with a diploma. And I'd hate to see us lose that.
I want to point out, there's no intent with this proposal for any opportunity that's currently in place for students to be taken away. So as you saw a moment ago, districts are choosing to support this opportunity with school systems. That is not a part of this proposal to take that away. You still have the ability to do that. You're the ones paying for that. That will continue. That is not something that and I want to make sure you all, we've said that a couple of times, but we really want to make sure that you know that if you're providing that opportunity for your students, this is not meant to take that opportunity away. So we actually built that slide in just to share that out, but we definitely are messaging that stronger than we did in the first presentation.
I appreciate that. I'm just wondering, I was not at the Accountability Commission meeting, the last one. I understand that this was part of that. Dr. Joseph, do you have any insight as to what the discussion, tenor of the discussion was relative to ACT and its importance and use, or what the future may be for not ACT? I'm talking about workkeys.
Right, so that meeting was like over 4 hours long, and a big chunk of it was the discussion about ACT and workkeys, and I think for the most part, and this was one of the areas that we wanted to come back to and discuss. There were a lot of people who wanted to keep workkeys and didn't understand the purpose behind you allowing all students to take ACT, but won't allow all students to take workkeys. I believe also the AccuPlacer test came into mention, about, students who are on that career path, that if you're going to a technical college, those students have to take the AccuPlacer test. So, looking at that and then how workkeys. For me, so if you go back to that slide again with the points awarded, that when the points started going down is when ESSA came into play, right? When we had that big shift in accountability, and 21 became the new number instead of the 18. And so I think you saw a lot of school systems trying to figure out how we're going to be able to maintain our scores with ACT, knowing that this big change has occurred. And if you also remember, they changed it again when the workkeys test changed. Y'all recall that? A couple of years ago. So it changed twice, the points that were awarded to our students taking the workkeys test. So to answer your question, I hope I'm doing a good job at it, is that this will be an item that will come back to the Accountability Commission for further review. Is that correct?
Yes. I would just
just like to, I guess, caution that for us not to look at a simplistic answer to a very complex question. When we looked at the decline in the ACT scores, I think it coincided as well with our increased attention to the Jump Start diploma and those kids. And more kids were choosing that particular pathway. And as they chose that pathway, their curriculum choices changed as well. So they didn't take geometry, they didn't take, maybe they took more of the applied ELA and math than the true ELA and math that may have prepared them for the tops. That could be one indicator. But I think a more systemic problem that we have is what was mentioned earlier. If we're looking at trying to increase our scores on the ACT, the composite scores, then we've got to look at our standards, curriculum, and assessment all the way through the continuum. Do our standards, do our ELA, primarily ELA and math standards, K through 12, address the standards that are being assessed on the ACT? And when we align our standards, our curriculum, and our assessment, if we're going to be doing that all the way up through the K-12 continuum, then I think we're going to see increases on the ACT index and the ACT composite score. So I think, yeah, because maybe we're taking more worksheets, that may be one indicator, but that's not going to solve this problem. That's not going to solve us, however we decide whether we do this or whether we don't do it. That to me is not going to solve the problem of our kids not scoring as well on the ACT. There's a much bigger and more complex issue that we need to address to make that happen. And are those composites both public and non-public? I've asked that before. Isn't that for Louisiana both public, non-public?
These numbers are public only, but we also have including non-public as well.
So those indicators throughout those years are just the public school kids?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I think that when we try to address the situation in total of why our kids aren't scoring as well on the ACT, we've got to do a much deeper dive into this, because this is just a little patchwork to me. That this isn't going to solve it.
Mr. Watts, just to piggyback a little bit off of Dr. Joseph and Ms. Vaucher, just like we talked about in K2, like that is, what we're proposing there is not to solve it. You know, we have work to do around pre-service teachers, professional development for our teachers now. I mean, things as simple as making sure we have classroom libraries in place. I mean, access to books. There are a lot of different factors that go into it. I think what Ms. Vaucher just said is so true. This is not going to solve it, but it could be, and we believe it's a part of it. We are working right now to, just to what Ms. Vaucher said, we're working with an institution, and we are going to be, in the very near future, doing a study of this whole ACT concern in our state around what you talked about, around the standards, around the curriculum. You know, we have a sense of what they will find when they do this deep dive, but we don't want that to influence their discovery process. And so we're about to embark on this process with an institution here in the state that is also very interested in ACT, and that will be happening in short order as well to explore some of the very things Ms. Vaucher is talking about.
All right, I've called on Jared Martin. Jared Martin is our superintendent in LaFouche Parish.
Thank you. She actually took most of what I was going to say. Thank you, Mrs. Perfect. Very well said. But I did have a question about the ACT data. Does the state have the disaggregated ACT data that would show TOPS versus Jumpstart children, how they performed over those same years? And do we see a decline in the university track children that parallels the overall decline in ACT growth statewide?
We do have that data, and have the ability to provide it to this group. My recollection is that the decline is felt across both groups, but I believe.
So it fell across both groups?
But I do not recall the extent to which it is of equal proportion or a decline is more stark in one group versus the next. We would have to review that data.
Anecdotally, as a high school principal, I theorized that it was the Jumpstart students that were really degrading the performance because they were not being exposed to the curriculum. I saw it firsthand as a high school principal, and that's what Ms. Voce was speaking of, and so I was just curious about that. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Ed Concy in St. James Parish.
Yes, I agree with my colleague Steve from Wynn. Let's not throw this baby out with the bathwater. We got some great things going on with Ken Bradford, particularly lining up with apprenticeships. We don't want to lose workkeys because if LCTCS, Monty Sullivan, tie in with us with NCCER and pull this whole thing together, we got something extraordinarily good in this state. So please consider that, keeping workkeys. Also, Doris is right about ACT. You got to start looking at ACT Aspire, folks. I've been saying this for years. If you want ACT to go up, you start like with the standards and so forth. Now, I know there's money tied up in this, superintendent, so be careful. And the other thing is follow the money. I'm not sure in 9th grade we weren't given work keys because it was tied up to the MFP some kind of way. You took a VOTEC course or something, tied in with work keys. There was some money in that.
Any other comment on ACTVs, work keys?
Thank you, Mr. Cassian, for introducing Ken Bradford.
He's a St. James boy.
Good morning. I know many of y'all, Ken Bradford, Office of Career and College Readiness. I want to start this morning before I get to the proposal for the strength of diploma with just a bit of context for what has led us to here. First, I just want to start with some work that has been going on. The first is that the Board of Regents and Bessie have both adopted a statewide goal that by the beginning of 2025, that freshman class, that all public high school graduates will complete high school with college credit, a post-secondary credential, or both. Second is, I want to talk about the dual enrollment task force. Mr. Falk, that is with us here today, has been co-chair of that with Dr. Kim Hunter-Reed from Board of Regents. It's been ongoing now for almost 2 years, and they've been studying the impact of dual enrollment and how dual enrollment in the state can be moved forward. There's been lots of representation on there, Counselors Association, Principals Association when Superintendent Tommy Bother was a principal, Ms. Voce is on there, Ms. Pope from the LSBA, Dr. Pope was on there as well. Coming out of that, one of the recommendations is that each high school student have the opportunity to enroll in at least 4 dual enrollment courses before graduation, and that the school accountability system provide corresponding and appropriate incentives for dual enrollment as high school students that take dual enrollment. And the third piece here is the legislature. Representative Ken Brass, St. James Parish, through Act 204 of the regular session, had a bill around a statewide dual enrollment framework. And that framework also called for students getting access to 4 dual enrollment courses that would be funded. I also serve, in addition to being on the dual enrollment task force, I'm on the College and Career Readiness Commission that's led by Dr. Henderson from the UL system. And they were sharing some data recently, and I wanted to bring it to your attention today. And that's that since 2010, the amount of student debt for college has increased to over $1.5 trillion. That number is disproportionately felt by black communities who owe $7,400 more on average than their white peers. And also a recent study that concluded that with dual enrollment programs, parents and students realize significant cost savings with lower tuition or debt payments in the future. So when we start talking about this new proposed strength of diploma, it's going to really take into consideration the different levels and amount of dual enrollment that can be considered. There's been some concern in the past about the implementation, the fidelity, the consistency of dual enrollment across the state. So I thought it was important this morning to also point out that as part of the dual enrollment task force, one of the items that has been getting discussed over the last 2 years is professional development for dual enrollment instructors, monitoring of dual enrollment courses by the Board of Regents and the various institutions. So I just wanted to point out here that the Board of Regents has committed to training and quality assurance for Louisiana institutions, and the Board of Regents, pursuant to the Academic Affairs Policy 2.22, is going to be doing reporting and monitoring of dual enrollment. So now to the proposal. I'll start with what is currently in place. And so I'll look at this through two different lenses. There is currently a lens for when college credit is earned, and there's currently a lens for industry-based credentialing that is earned. So in the current formula, to get to 100 points, that would be when you get to 100 points, just completing your curriculum and getting your high school diploma will get you 100 points. If you're a Jumpstart student and you're having to earn that industry-based credential, the lowest level of industry-based credential you can graduate with. 110 points in the system is currently passing a course with a grade in dual enrollment, advanced placement, or IB. Noting that if I'm going to get an IB or AP points in this category, you also have to sit for the exam. What generates 110 points is a statewide basic credential. This is a credential that is recognized by the Workforce Investment Council. It leads to 4-star and 5-star jobs in the state. They put out a list every 2 years of what's called the statewide focus list. Those are credentials leading to 4- and 5-star jobs in the state. Currently, the system, what gets 150 points is if you get a single AP score of 3 or higher, a CLEP score of 50 higher, an IB score of 4 or higher, or you get an advanced statewide credential. This would be an example of NCCER. If you're taking NCCER, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and you get a level 1, that gets you 110. If you get to a level 2, that gets you to 150 points. And the most you can get in the system right now is 160 points with an associate's degree. Next slide is the proposal. And the proposal here is, you'll notice instead of going from 100 to 110 to 150 to 160, the 100, nothing changes. That's still the starting point. This would be, like, if you're a Tufts University student, you're graduating, you've met all your graduation requirements. If you're a Jumpstart student, you have to have that industry-based credential. This might be your NCCER helper for air conditioning. It's a helper credential, 100 points. The next bucket, we start to make the shift towards college credit. It's not specific to advanced placement, it's not specific to IB, it's not specific to CLEP, and it's not specific to dual enrollment. It's saying that if you earn 6 college credit hours, that's the equivalent of 2 classes, 2 college courses. You get 6 college credit hours through any combination. Dual enrollment, AP, CLEP, or IB, that generates 125. So you could have an AP score of 3 or higher, and you could bundle that with a dual enrollment course. You could have 2 dual enrollment courses. You could have 2 AP courses. You could have a CLEP score of 50 or higher and 1 dual enrollment course. What you're getting to here is 6 Board of Regents recognized college credits, which is the equivalent of 2 college classes. 125 down here is again the statewide basic credential. 125 points. Currently that's 125. This is your level 1. So when I use the example of NCCR air conditioning, here you're a helper. Here at the 125 level 1, you can start to do air conditioning stuff like ductwork. You can start doing that. Now let's go to the third bucket, 150. Currently, this is an AP of 3, an IB of 4, a CLEP of 50. This is now recognizing those 4 dual enrollment courses that was recommended by the task force, was recommended in the statewide dual enrollment framework, Act 204, Representative Ken Brass from St. James Parish. 12 Board of Regents hours, recognized hours, equivalent of 4 classes. This would be 150. Again, any combination to get to the 12. 2 APs, a dual enrollment, and a CLEP gets you to the 12. 4 dual enrollment gets you to the 12. It's a combination. 150, this would be your level 2. It's an advanced NCCER. Now that I'm doing air conditioning, I'm past the helper, I'm past the duct work. Now I can do commercial air conditioning work. That's an advanced level 2. The newest bucket. It's 175 points. The only domain of strength of diploma quadrants where you step outside of that 150. It's 175. 3 things in the 175 bucket. An associate's degree, which is what we're working on right now with Fast Forward. 8 regional school systems have received planning grants. They're working in their regions with higher ed and business partners and post-secondary to develop associate degree frameworks. Number 2, a full apprenticeship. If your school system partners with business and industry, students are fully immersed in an apprenticeship program, a state registered apprenticeship program, and they complete that for their 2 years of high school, that would generate 175. The third is a level 3 or level 4 credential. Level 3 and level 4. Again, if I were to go back to the air conditioning, when you're getting to level 3 and level 4, you can do commercial air conditioning work, you can do heat pumps, things of that nature. So again, the higher value your credential is in your skill set, the more points you generate. Fully immersed in an apprenticeship, not to be confused with an internship. This would be a state recognized apprenticeship program. Or an associate's degree would be 175. This possible shift would occur beginning in school year 2023-2024. And I would just say that the discussion that Dr. Joseph was part of at the Accountability Commission, we got through to this point. It seems like the commission was pretty much aligned, and they have asked us to come back and do some further research and some additional considerations in the 175-point bucket. And my last slide, and then I'll pause, we'll take questions, is I just pointed out about the statewide articulation and transfer council. It's been in place since 2009, Act 356, and this is independent universities in the state, like your Loyolas, Dillard's, etc., your Board of Regents institutions in the state. It's currently chaired by Matt Lee, Dr. Matt Lee, Vice Provost of LSU, as Regents representative, department representative, etc. This council puts out a grid of advanced placement courses and courses that are accepted across institutions, and they articulate those to make sure there's articulation across institutions. This same body also puts out the common course catalog about aligned dual enrollment courses. So this council, this body here would be leveraged to back here to make sure the appropriate courses are up in your buckets here when they're TOPS core aligned college credit courses. I'll just close on this. We had a question about some advanced placement courses. If a student scores a 5, for instance, on an AP course, in our state university system, if they were to recognize, for example, a 5 of AP Human Geography, if they were to recognize that for 2 college credit classes, which in some cases they do, using this methodology, that would count for 2 of the college classes. If, again, and that would be done through the articulation council. So I did want to point out that there could be a potential here where there would be some advanced placements and high CLEP scores that if they warrant and they're worthy of generating more college credit, then that would be factored in as part of the associates, the 12, or the 6. And I'll pause here, Dr. Brumley, and see what questions we have.
I want people to realize how significant this is. As we've gone along year after year, we've just isolated ourselves with the number of points. We haven't given the points to allow us to expand dual enrollment. We are looking at continuing the dual enrollment task force, this legislation. But I also am going to say that for years I had been advocating when I was in Central. I had students take 4 AP courses and get credited 4 AP courses, and all I received was 1 set of points, never recognizing the fact that our students were going above and beyond. And now we take and we can do the same thing with dual enrollment, and we are going to have an expansion. We are going to have mobile labs that are going to go out into the various areas of the state and provide us much more access to dual enrollment. So we're going to have to shift our gears and start looking at that and planning for those things to be put in place.
Just add to that. Also during the Accountability Commission meeting, there was also discussion about students having access to those dual enrollment courses. As you know, right now, you have to score a certain amount on the ACT in order to be eligible to take dual enrollment, and the Board of Regents is having a discussion about how to get rid of that barrier for all of our students who don't meet that particular criteria. So I wanted to thank you all for that, because that speaks to equity and, what our students should have across the board.
Two quick questions. So the implementation here is really for current freshmen. Am I thinking about that right? If the shift would be
The 23-24.
So the shift would be for the 23-24 graduates?
23-24 all students.
Okay, so it's not, it doesn't start till 23-24.
It doesn't count in year, yes, the points do not count until that year.
Which would be this year's current freshman graduate. Correct.
Yes.
That's, I wanted to try to get that confident. On the level 3, level 4 credentials, are we talking about NCCER credentials there, Ken? So level 3 electricity, we retooled, we retooled welding.
Good question. We're framing this bucket as advanced plus. So right now it stops at advanced, but yes, it could be an NCCER level 3, level 4. It could also be, I think, the Workforce Investment Council is willing to look at credentials, perhaps some real high demand IT credentials that currently might be sitting in this bucket, and they would say those are extremely worthy. We need those. They're very demanding, they're hard to get, and shift those up into an advanced.
But regardless, right now, you are referencing level 3, level 4 credentials using the NCCER.
Correct, that would be an example here.
And there could be some even shifts where level 2, you're saying high demand stuff would be.
That's correct, yes. There would be
But a level 3 millwright would fit in that last bucket.
Yes, sir.
And just for clarity, folks in the background have a hard time hearing, please use your mics, and that's my fault. I haven't been doing it either. But this kicks in 23-24, all students that year. So our current freshmen then will have this as a part of their accountability system their senior year, for clarity.
That's correct.
Others?
Mr. Bradford, you mentioned about this other discussion in the last category. Could you share some of that discussion?
Yeah. I think there was some discussion here about, some very specific discussion about advanced placement, for one, in this bucket, about the College Board currently has, they issue a certain credential or a type of certificate for students that might get 4 scores of 3 or higher, 5 scores of 3 or higher. Would there be consideration for that to also be up here as an additional one? And then there was also a request to look at, is this equates to 60 hours right here of an associate's degree? Number one, the question is, does it have to culminate in an associate degree, or could it be 60 hours? And was 60 hours the right number here to be in this bucket?
Mr. DeVilliers, I would like to add to that.
Okay.
Our approach with this has been, and I know this from sitting in your seats, like you have conversations with fellow superintendents, and some of you might say, we really like AP here. Dual enrollment in my system seems to be the best. This is what we like to work on. And so we try to create a system that allows you to choose the pathway that worked best within your local context, and those things to be equal, as opposed to the previous where one of those really outweighed the other, and it was really pushing up against the recommendations from the dual enrollment task force and some of the things they were saying around dual enrollment. So what we try to do is say, you know what, if AP is where you choose to invest, then so be it. If it's dual enrollment, if that works for you, so be it. So we try to just make those things equal.
Yeah, and that's why I asked that question, because I know that we have a lot of AP, and that's because the state a few years back was pushing us all to AP. Now it seems like we look like we were sliding more to dual enrollment. But the issue is, like you said, Kate, it's what's best in your area. And then going to the associate degree question, I had a conversation with a parent just the other day that their child started college with 80 credit hours from our school system, but didn't have an associate degree. So where does that fall? And I guess that's those conversations.
I think that's a large part of what we've also tried to do, because we all know students who graduate with 15 hours or 27 hours or the number, and they're just random courses.
Right.
And so what we've tried to do is, and this is in concert with Board of Regents, is to streamline this so that students come through with a coherent set of courses that can be applied to either an associate's degree or that 4-year degree.
Right.
Well, thanks, Kevin.
So on the apprentice, the full apprenticeship, and we're talking about a formal apprenticeship program that we would have to connect with. For example, ABC has some apprenticeship pieces there. And so we would probably have a lot of learning that we would need some help with on how do we, where are those partnerships that exist for all of us.
And to that point, Mr. Alexander, too, like we have rural communities where we have to work there, and this is going to be a catalyst for us to work in rural communities to think through how could this happen there. And Mr. Bradford and I spoke about that even this morning about, our opportunity here to think about creative ways for solves in rural communities that presently don't exist.
And I just don't know how many apprenticeship programs actually exist.
Anybody else want to speak to the phone? We'll keep rolling on in to our next bucket here, civics.
Yes, I'd like to cover this third section, which is our civics proposal. First, would start out with some research, which actually points to some troubling trends at the levels for civic knowledge and engagement. Only 1 in 4 Americans, 26%, can name all 3 branches of the U.S. government according to a survey here that we have linked. That's actually a 12% decline from 5 years earlier when 38% of Americans could name all 3 branches of government. The most recent survey also shows misunderstandings about purposes, powers, and functions of government. A second piece of research shows or points to voter turnout in national elections has remained below 70% for decades. And those voter rates are even lower for Black, Hispanic, and other non-white or non-Hispanic ethnicities, consistently below that white voting rate that was just pointed out. And then again, in ages 18 to 29, those particular percentages have been below 55% during the same time period, which leaves around 45% or more people in this age range considered to be disengaged at this point. Additionally, we'd like to share out that the United States lags behind most of its peer nations in terms of voting age population turnout. And so as we turn to high school civics, would like to share with you that another piece of research has shown that students who receive effective civic learning are more likely to vote and also more likely to discuss politics, actually 4 times more likely to volunteer and work on community issues, and more confident in their ability to speak publicly and communicate with their elected representatives. Would also like to piggyback a little bit on Kim Bradford's presentation around the strength of diploma and this idea of opening up pathways, junior, senior years for apprenticeships, associate's degrees, and so forth, and also with support for the Fast Forward initiative. That in doing so, we would like to consider a shift in the high school studies, social studies assessment in high school from U.S. history to civics, pretty much ensuring that our LEAP 2025 assessments would all occur in the freshman and sophomore years. That would also allow the junior and senior years to not only focus on pathways of post-secondary opportunity, but also it would protect U.S. history to line up into some of these dual enrollment and AP courses and therefore not be competing with a high school assessment structure. Really wanted to begin looking at this for where we would like to land. In terms of national landscape and what it looks like currently out in the nation with civics assessments, it did provide just a roll-up for you of what other states are doing around this. As you can see, there's some numbers here starting to show that they are working toward government tests or civics tests in different states. Also, some citizenship tests are being put out there in other states as well. Would like to share with you today that the proposal is that Louisiana plans to transition to high school social studies assessment from U.S. history to civics. This will fall alongside a current revision of social studies standards that is happening right now, and therefore aligning an assessment with the civics portion of those standards. We would like to share out that, again, this transition will support our priority for students graduating ready for college and career readiness, and then also beyond that for civic life. This shift would also support the idea that or the vision that our students will become very productive and engaged members of society, and that we will be expressing, the need for them to become very well informed in this area. We also have pointed out, as I did earlier, that students will continue to learn U.S. history. We will continue to include both civics and U.S. history in the studies. Right now, there's nothing pointing to U.S. history not being a graduation requirement for both diplomas that are currently in place. And then also, we will continue to support resources around that course as we move forward. There is a timeline of events that's being proposed in the school year 21-22. U.S. history will stay operational. There will not be any work on this civics assessment in terms of out in the schools. There will be a lot of work here in the agency. Then in 22-23, U.S. history will stay operational again. We will have the implementation of new K through 12 social studies standards that will have civics alignment to them. And we'll also be administering a statewide some field testing in civics in that year. In 23-24, we will maintain the U.S. history as an operational test for those students who are in the cohort for that being their high school assessment. And then we will shift to the cohort of 9th graders in that year for the civics assessment to be the high school assessment for them. That will continue from that point forward with cohorts of children. And much like we did when we moved from English 2 to English 3, the U.S. history test will eventually become a district-administered high school assessment for those students who still need it under their cohort for graduation purposes. And that somewhat leads to this slide, which shows the freshman cohort timeline. Your freshmen of 21-22 will have U.S. history as their required assessment, same for 22-23. And then starting with freshman cohort in 23-24 and beyond, civics will become their social studies high school assessment. There will be a plan, as mentioned, with earlier initiatives, same here, that we will support school systems in transitioning to civics. As we know, there may be a need for some course progression shifts. We will be there to support that, along with aligning any instructional materials through our social studies content standards revision, and then anything that comes out of that aligning to the assessment itself in supporting instructional materials in the schools. We'll also become responsible in supporting you as that U.S. history exam shifts from a statewide assessment to a district level assessment, much like we did in shifting English 2 to English 3. And then keeping English 2 in place for those who needed it. And then we also will be supporting any educators as well as students and families that need it throughout this transition. Dr. Brumley, that ends the high school accountability section of this presentation.
Questions from anybody about the civics piece? Dr. Joseph?
I don't have issues about the civics piece other than I just wanted to share with all the superintendents that 93% of you all agree with the switch from U.S. history to the civics course, and I guess you would decide within your districts at what point the students would take the test. But for the most part, everyone agrees with it. There is one item that I would like to address, and I think this is the appropriate time to do it because the next thing on the agenda is about mentor work group recommendations.
Rose, are you going to grow?
Yes.
Can I say one thing about that? But before Dr. Joseph goes into that next conversation, I just wanted to put in a plug for the work of the Social Studies Standards Review. It's not part of the agenda, but really I think this is one of the most consequential things we're doing this year over the next few years is to do work with our social studies standards. You know, a little biased because that's my area of certification, but we are moving away from, or the intent rather is to move away from just facts and dates and people, to move to an inquiry approach to social studies that asks our students questions and has them utilize all those resources and people and facts and figures and documents to answer that question that's being asked of them. It also is going to make better sense in terms of progression, where it's not so choppy what students are doing over the course of their years of understanding social studies. And it's also the intent is to be more inclusive of the diversity of our state. as we work through that specific set of standards. So I'm really excited about this work. I think that it holds a lot of promise for helping our kids be ready to live productive citizens once they leave us. Outside of anything that has to do with an assessment, I think it's really going to help in that. I think it's a real opportunity. We had over 300 people apply to be part of the process to review and revise the social studies standards, and we have a really diverse pool of individuals taking part in that. So once those standards are approved by Bessie, then you'll see curriculum come into place after that really supports that in a better way. And we also know that that's been in many ways an area for improvement as well as that social studies curriculum K-12. So just wanted to, it has nothing to do with this presentation other than you being aware that that process is taking place. Dr. Joe.
So one of the items that was discussed at the Accountability Commission was student growth. And while there was no recommendation to bring before Bessie, I think that it would be appropriate that that conversation comes to this accountability, this committee as well. So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask if we can either add this item as an on the agenda or keep it under the high school accountability. I would like for it to be added because, you know, it just makes it clean, a clean discussion.
I would second the motion.
Student growth.
Dr. Jones, you're making a motion to add this?
I would like to make a motion to add the discussion of student growth to the agenda.
The current agenda item?
The next meeting, I think, is in June.
Mr. Powell, second to that. Anybody opposed to that? Motion carries. Dr. Jones?
Well, thank you. So just wanted to, once again, this was an item that was discussed at the Accountability Commission. And I'm just going to use the slides that were provided to us. They talked about the current SPS formula weights, and as we all know what that is already. And then they also talked about the relationship between the school performance score and economically disadvantaged school systems, and show that there is some correlation to those pieces of information. And then also the relationship between progress index and economically disadvantaged students. I'm not going to go through all of that because it's in the slides and it's available to you. And they also talked about where Louisiana falls with regard to other school systems or other states. We fall really low, you know, when we talk about the percentage that we put in our accountability with regard to student growth. And they also talked to us about how the different states measure their growth. And so just wanted to have a discussion about that. One of the Accountability Commission members requested that the State Department provide us with simulations about what it would look like if we had growth more than 25%. If it was 30%, 40, 50%. So I don't know if that's something that you all would want to consider as well, but I do know that a discussion should be had regarding our growth and what are your thoughts and concerns about it. And maybe we can also possibly request that the State Department take a look at what it would look like for our school systems if we included a larger percentage of growth in the accountability structure.
I just want to add, Judge, I had not seen these numbers before, and you know, this is a discussion that's been ongoing, I think, at least since Dr. Brumley has become state superintendent. And I guess to state the fact that I'm a huge proponent for us increasing the percentage weight for growth. I think everybody who has any association with education, to put my personal feelings out there, should agree. We should all be able to agree that we're expected to grow students, no matter where we get them from. And this foundational formula that's based on students achieving mastery, no matter where they come from, is, to me, somewhat flawed. But yeah, I think we can all agree that no matter where we get students, after they spend 182 days with us, or however many days in church they are, they should grow. And I think this chart, slide 63 on the accountability slide deck, shows that by going up to a 50% weight, 80% of the schools that are now currently rated as S grow students at a rate where they would not be rated. You'd only have 2% of the student schools still rated as F. And so that's a strong measure that our teachers and our schools are growing children. Now, we can debate on how much growth and all those things, but they're growing children, and that needs to be celebrated, and it needs to be awarded through the accountability system. So that's all I'll say about that.
Another point is that they limited it to 3rd through 8th grade because at the high school level there are so many, opportunities for students to show growth by way of the graduation rate and also the index. But there are things within that structure that speak to growth. And then it would be very difficult to include additional growth in the high school's formula since there's so many other components in it. And right now it's only 12.5% growth, but then that's coupled with the EOC status. I can speak personally about this growth, in St. Helena, we're at F, but we grow our students every year. And we grow our students at a faster pace than, a lot of schools across the state, and it's not celebrated, it's not recognized because, and it's demoralizing. It makes you feel like, you're really not doing anything. People look at our students and they think that our students aren't smart enough. They look at our teachers and think that our teachers aren't doing what they need to do when they are. And you look at the high teacher turnover rate, you look at the lack of resources that we've had over the years, and still, we grow every year. And so I think that just personally, as a superintendent from a school system like St. Helena, we deserve to have a little bit more. I think that we need to be able to celebrate the accomplishments that we've made over the years.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. And before we go too far, this will be an item on our June SAC meeting, so we can all come back with some data and some, not that we don't all agree with you, and as Mr. Powell said, agree with him, to come back with just some, just some points of our own to have put into that, so, yeah, point taken.
And I do want to just clarify too that there was a motion made and a second at the Accountability Commission meeting to bring, as Dr. Joseph has commented on, specific weight of 47.5% for K through 5 sections of weight because they don't have, K through 7. And then when an 8th grade is added, it would go to 45% because of your DCAI. So that was very specific, and so we're going to return to that commission with those numbers in hand. So I did want to point that out, that's a very clear next step for the commission.
And I'm glad Kathy clarified it. I think it would be appropriate to have it on the agenda of the next accountability commission, and maybe you need to start a little early because it's going to go for a while. But that way it can
Yes, I think we may survey what time we start that next meeting.
That way it can be considered along with other things that are going to be going before S in June.
Thank you. And so as we close out 3.3, Ms. Wendy Bodwin from LSBA would like to speak.
So I just want to provide some information in terms of high school accountability. So the LSBA is committed to advocating on behalf of alignment and equity in the high school accountability pieces. So in alignment with our survey and some concerns that we've received from school system, I want to provide you some information that we've gotten. So bear with me because it'll be a little bit of everything that you've heard in high school accountability so far. With regard to ACT and workkeys, many of our school systems have expressed, as many of you have expressed, the desire for alignment in terms of college and career pathway students being able to continue to take the workkeys test. While we recognize that the department is not removing this opportunity for schools to still test students, what the concern from our school systems has been is that by removing TOPS diploma pathway students from taking workkeys in the accountability system, then we are not going to reward the human capital and the financial resources that the schools are putting into students to get them both college and career ready. We know that we have students who are going to get workkeys certificates and both go to college. They may work while in college, they may defer for a while and go to the military. So we are supportive in seeing additional options being presented to the commission and to this advisory committee on other opportunities for alignment and point changes to the ACT workkeys. Additionally, the LSBA has received a number of calls from business and industry who are our partners in the state, and they wanted the commission to know, and they want the Superintendent's Advisory Council and the department to know that business and industry is supportive of workkey certifications. They are also in several districts funding the administration of these certificates, and so it's important for them that it continues to be offered to as many students as possible. Another place that we'd like to see alignment for high school accountability with ACT workkeys is in the rationale for ACT 17 earning points and a silver workkeys. We know that the TOPS Tech Award is eligible to students whether they score an ACT 17 or a silver on the workkeys, but in the current proposal that is still being discussed, those two score values are not treated the same, so we'd like to see equity in that particular area. And then finally, we would like to see course alignment. If ACT is going to remain a standard that we want to reach, we know that we are going to have difficulty improving student outcomes on the ACT if the course alignment from the first year of high school to the third year of high school doesn't match up to what's being tested on the ACT. In terms of alignment and equity and strength of diploma, just a few points. Some of the superintendents have already pointed out that the new strength of diploma index calculations would begin with the May 2024 graduates. Their cohort began with this current school year, and so without the framework or the first year of their cohort, they may be disadvantaged in earning the maximum number of points in that new calculation. And we would like to thank from DOE, Mr. Ken Bradford for his hard work in the dual enrollment task force and for coming up with this point strength of diploma index. We actually believe that the strength of diploma index now has a more equitable point assignment, moving from one category to the next, and we're pleased to see that. But we would like to see some consideration for adjusting the timeline so schools and students have the full duration of their cohort to qualify for the points they'll be judged by in May 2024. And also, just to point out, in our survey at LSBA, we had several school systems identify that they would like to see even further opportunities to earn points in the Strength of Diploma Index. One, for students with disabilities, and two, for students who are obtaining specific credentials or accolades in the community that don't necessarily cost the school system a financial investment to obtain. And so we would like to continue the conversations on the Strength of Diploma Index. We think we are at a good starting point and hope to continue having these conversations in the future.
Thank you. All right, that being it, we'll close out 3.3.
And I promise I'm done. Just one more thing, and I promise I'm done. Can the information that you provide the Accountability Commission with regards to growth also be shared here with the superintendents in this center?
Are you talking about at the next meeting?
Yes, the simulations that you're going to be providing.
Oh, okay, yes, I understand what you're saying, yes.
Okay, anyone opposed to the motion or to receive this report? Motion carries. Next item is page 26, item 4.1. Consideration of revisions to Bulletin 746, Louisiana Standards for State Certification of School Personnel regarding the Mentor Teacher Work Group recommendations. Need a motion to receive.
Done?
I'll move.
Motion. Second motion. All right, yeah. Dr. Bowman, thanks.
Yes, sir. As you all are aware, whenever we were in the spring of last year going into the summer, there were, it strikes me a little over 100 college students who were trying to finish out their degree and were unable to be placed because they didn't have residency placement. That could have been because that was a newer policy going into effect. It could have been related to the pandemic. It could have been a number of things, but we brought a recommendation to Bessie, and Bessie rightfully approved some emergency type flexibilities, which would increase the number of people who could serve as a mentor during this particular year. And so that was like a one-time solve to help be able to place a number of students and allow them to finish up and ultimately graduate college and become teachers. As part of that, there was a request for us to have a work group come together, visit, discuss this policy over the course of the year, and bring back recommendations to Bessie should we believe that there are recommendations that need to go to Bessie for refinement of this particular bulletin item and around mentor teachers. And so Kim Eckert on our team has been working over the course of this year and has done, in my opinion, an outstanding job of facilitating a complicated process to be able to get input across the state on how to make the policy a little stronger. And what she is going to present today are the findings and beliefs of that work group, of that task force, and these items will go to Bessie to hopefully strengthen that policy around mentor teachers. So,
Thank you. I feel like you guys should get brain breaks or snacks. That was really intense. All right. Hello. So just as Dr. Brumley said, this particular work group that we formed, it had a really great representative set, not only of school leaders, a superintendent, a representative from LaSaspa, teachers who are also mentors, and it was an honor to serve in such a group because I actually fall into a lot of those categories because I still teach and I still host a resident. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So he gave you the overview, and we do know that this policy went into effect in August, and obviously you're very familiar with how it sort of played out, especially because we know that any mentor, not only an undergraduate, but also someone who is mentoring a postbac candidate with a PL, also needed to have the same mentor certificate. So something that was requested at the last Bessie was just a look at what did it look like? How did it shake out in terms of the waivers that were requested? And so it is kind of interesting to look. There was actually a pretty clear 50-50 split, the request for mentors of undergraduate candidates and of postbac candidates. So we know that there was a need in both spaces. And something that wasn't surprising, we know that there was a need across 6 through 12 and lots of different content areas that weren't really represented. And whenever we did look at the categories that people qualified for under the waiver, over 84% were highly recommended because of their effective compass ratings and their student data. So these were the actual recommendations of the work group. We met from October to February, and we also took into account a lot of conversations with teachers in the program that did complete it, and also teachers in the program that did not complete it, and maybe didn't even have a desire to, especially not in a year of COVID, but they did state some concerns before it started. So the 6 recommendations, 3 of them actually would require a policy change. So the first one, honoring previous training and experience. We know that there are a lot of teachers that have been very, very effective mentors and have been coaching. Some held EDL, some had masters in curriculum and instruction. So making sure that we're actually honoring the experience of teachers prior to the passing of this particular policy. The second recommendation was to remove content-specific assessments, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we arrived at that in just a sec. The third was to create a mentor support guide. So that's there's already some really great practices all over the state. So that's on us to be able to provide that and put that in the hands of different districts, where it's working, what are they doing differently, what are they doing that teachers are responding to, how is it affecting kids, how is it affecting teachers. The next piece, creating an add-on mentor endorsement. And this piece more so affected our ability to really kind of spot whenever a teacher has this, because as it stands, it's an ancillary certificate and it's not on a teacher's primary certificate. So there was a request, especially from teacher prep higher ed, to make sure that was on one certificate. And then exploring mentor assessment content and scoring to make sure, the name of the game, we've been hearing this all morning, is there reliability in the scoring of this? Can we be sure that a teacher in this school is getting scored the same on the assessment as a teacher in the same school a hall over? And then the last piece was granting time for us to actually get teachers back into the fold. We know that teachers don't actually have to be a mentor in their entire career. They can have a totally amazing career and never once take a resident. So we need some time to make sure that we communicate with teachers, come back if these things are passed. Please, we need you. We really value what you do. So in terms of honoring previous training and experiences, you would have seen some of these reflected on the waiver request from this year. But we did want to make sure that if people held an EVL 1 or any of the previous leadership credentials, that would be allowed, including the older supervision of student teaching certification. Educators who have earned the NIT teacher evaluator certificate, so those top mentor master teachers or principals, obviously it's an incredibly rigorous process. So making sure that those people can continue coaching and doing that work and also host residents was really important. So there was a crosswalk that we created to show alignment in the spaces that the mentor assessments are asking for, and what these particular preparations also had that overlap. And then the last piece was if people were certified class observers, which was also a topic of discussion this morning. Those too would also be able to host mentors. Okay, so this piece, removing the content-specific assessments, the rationale for that, first, the time it takes to complete all of these, it was long cited as a deterrent for teachers to take this on, especially where they didn't necessarily see that it was really specific alignment to coaching itself. The second piece, for teachers to be able to engage in universal training, it wasn't specific to a lot of the content areas that are being requested, unless it was a literacy or numeracy focus. Teachers in band, teachers in science, it wasn't really applicable to any other space. And so that was a space that we felt was raising a lot of concerns for teachers. And then the last piece, it's actually a kind of intriguing idea, but to remove the content-specific assessments is to sharpen the focus on the coaching itself. Every really effective coach knows that reaching adults is a whole different skill set. It requires andragogy, it requires the ability to give feedback, it requires the ability to do so many different things rolled into one. So the idea is to leave content with roles that are designed for that, so that teachers could actually sharpen the focus on building their skill sets to work with adults and to actually improve those relationships and improve transference of the learning, which we really need to see. So this piece, really this won't affect anyone. It's more of an addition and not a subtraction of anything at all, because in spaces, if there's a charter or non-public, where teachers may not hold a teaching certificate, they can still earn this mentor piece. That's what the ancillary segment was placed in the policy to begin with. But for teachers who do hold a teaching certificate, it's shown as a specific add-on in certificates that we don't have to go search for that somewhere else. Okay. Oh, can I say, over to you, Mr. West Watts. That is all I have to share with you.
Are you sure you're done, Ms. Eckert?
That's all. I could fashion some more slides if you want.
Superintendent Brumley spoke about some flexibilities for 2021. The board has actually wanted to pursue those same flexibilities for 21, 22, and those will be considered at the April meeting, extending that waiver and those things for one more year.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And that was a strong recommendation from Ms. Aspa, and also Superintendent Watt spoke on that. It's still that idea that these things take so much time, and so giving another year to get things right, to get teachers with mentors and the residents match, and then also invite teachers back into this process after some of these changes have been applied.
Yeah, and so for me, I'm just my personal, as Mr. Collins said, opinion, this is a no-brainer because we had highly qualified teachers that we needed to be mentors that just chose not to. They're content experts, and they were having to go back through content training, and they just weren't willing to do it. And I don't know about y'all, but student teachers are a lifeblood for us, and it's the only way we're going to continue to grow the profession. And so I think these recommendations are awesome. I think think they're much needed, and it would definitely help us, and I hope you, in terms of getting folks willing to be mentors, and really work with them on what they need to be as a mentor, that which is a leader of another adult. Comments, anybody else?
So, if you are certified in class, you can become a mentor. If you're,
Yes, you.
No, you can't. Classroom.
Anybody else?
Well, I think that like in some districts, so she asked if she was certified, which she is, in class, could she host a resident? And I think that's what you're asking, but we also found that there were a lot of needs for those PLs, so being on the same campus and the same site, so that you can actually provide support for that post-bac candidate.
so the EL1, so it's basically central person.
You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, how many teachers hold this that have no desire to be a principal.
Anybody else? I would like to offer a substitute motion, as instead of just receiving this, that we would support this motion. If anybody would like to second that, I would like to make that substitute motion.
I'll second.
Excuse me, I cannot do that. So would anybody else like to?
I'll make the motion that we endorse.
Any second?
I second.
Second. I realized that after I did it.
Yeah.
Trying to slide that by, I didn't see you were paying attention. Yeah.
I wish I had a Shan Davis to help guide my interactions throughout the day.
All right, thank you, Ms. Acker. Dr. Bromley, thanks. Any closing comments?
Yeah, we dropped Literacy Louisiana Endeavor recently. We have a website up for that. We have a lot to add to that if we're going to go all in on literacy like I think we need to do, but we do have the first set of resources available on that website. It's in a release to you today. But it does give like month by month considerations that you might need to be thinking about as a system leader, principal, teacher, and then what you should and should not see maybe in classrooms very explicitly around the science of reading. So it's a start of a drop of information to help support you in that. And I hope you find time along with the principals to go and take a review of it. Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody. Dr. Bromley, thanks to you and your team again for all the input and all the work that you guys are doing. That being said, we will, if you're able to stay, we'll stay and visit here with some legislative updates, and we do have box lunches for everybody. On that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Alexander, second by Ms. Ebar. I'll just say motion carries. There's my gavel. Thanks everybody. We'll move on.
Okay, that meeting is not a vesting meeting, the legislative update is not part of this.
Yep, y'all, I have the box lunches.
This is just an informal meeting for us to do legislation.
Superintendent's box lunches.